Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, James Fauntleroy. So good to see all of you here on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon, this rainy Tuesday afternoon for me. The Jaybefaunt channel is also available. Also, if you guys would like to see me during the week for my readings. So if you guys can do that, that would be awesome if you guys would like to see that there. Also part of Revolutionary Blackout Network, so you can find me there on Sundays for the JB Show and Thursdays for the Savvy and JB Show. So thank you so very much to everybody for watching. If you guys have not, you can also subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles. If you have not already, go ahead and like the stream. This actually helps me out on the tube. So thank you very much for that in advance. So what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we have a few things we're going to be talking about. Later in the show today, we're going to be covering, so this is going to be a Florida heavy show. Just want to let you guys know that. But this is also for anybody that's throughout the United States. This can also influence some ideas, some things about policy that you may be dealing with in your own state as well. So later in the show today, we're going to be covering Amendment 3, Florida 2024 ballot measures. That's going to be happening here in the state. You're going to want to stay for this because we have some high hopes for this one. So it's going to be a great subject to get into. In the middle of our show, we're going to be covering about a collapse incoming. We're going to be talking about housing insurance in Florida. This is going to be a really interesting and deep subject to get into, because for those of you that are homeowners, you're going to want to stay for that one. But first, we're going to be talking to Todd Schaefer, who is running for Congress in Florida's 4th district. I would love to introduce my guest today, candidate for U.S. House 4th District of Florida, Mr. Todd Schaefer. Thank you so very much for being on the show.
Hey, JB, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to get into and ask you about first is, why are you running for Congress now?
All right, so do you want the long version or the short version?
Either way you got.
All right, so I grew up in a union family. I grew up in Anderson, Indiana. It was a UAW town. We were upper middle class. Everyone in the town thrived because the union was there. In the 90s, after NAFTA passed, the town started to degrade, and it started to go to the point where now it's just a stop on the interstate. So I joined the Navy, and I was in the Navy from 1998 to 2018. The end of 2018, I retired. And so growing up in a UAW family and then moving immediately into the military, I thought just everyone had basic needs met. I got into kind of the military bubble. I thought that everyone just had the things that we had. Until 2016, when a gentleman, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, Bernard Sanders, I believe is his name, was running in 2016. And when I started to follow his campaign, I came to the realization that the country that I thought that I was serving just does not exist. It's not out there. And again, growing up in a union family, I had health insurance growing up. My mom kept my dad's health insurance. He passed away when I was 9. But she kept his health insurance. She kept benefits because the UAW was so good, because the union negotiated all of those good contracts back in the day. She still actually gets survivor benefits from them. But like I said, I thought everyone just had that. I took for granted that everyone had that until much later in life. I didn't even realize how bad it was. After I retired, I got into real estate because I was like, I want my time back. After being a submariner for 21 years, you kind of want a little bit of your life back. So I got my real estate license and started practicing real estate in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia, because we've got a base right here in Kings Bay. and I wanted to help younger, stupider me, if I can say that politely, because I was always just a paycheck. As a guy who was military, who could get the VA loan, I was always just a paycheck when I bought and sold houses, and I wanted to be something different.
Yeah.
And then I started working with real people. When you get your real estate license, you start working with real people outside of the bubble that I had been in. And I started to see how badly people are struggling, and working with renters, and specifically how hard it is just to get by, just to meet your very, very basic needs. And I work with kids because Hilliard and Callahan are up here. They're pretty rural. I hate that word, but they're like good old farm country, good old backtown kind of easygoing places. And there are kids that grew up there that have to move to Georgia to be able to afford rent or to be able to afford to buy a house, because it's 60 or 70 grand cheaper just to go 15 minutes across the border.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking into our government here, our local government. And it's a good old boys club. You just get who you're going to get. In 2022, after the redistricting, we had John Rutherford, and we got redistricted in the 2022 election. The Democrat who tried, it's LaShonda Holloway. She's the same one who's running this time. And it's a plus 20 district. So we're just going to get the guy that we get. He was the mayor, Aaron Bean, who I'm running against. He was the mayor of Fernandina. And it was just, everyone knows his family. He's old money. His family's been in the area, and he was just the next guy who was in line for the congressional seat. No one likes him, but he has an R next to his name. So in a plus 20 district, he's going to be the guy we get. Mm-hmm. When I decided that I was thinking about running for this election, I reached out to LaShonda Holloway because she had run in 22. The Democrats deigned to give her $10,000 against his 1.1 million, I think is what he hauled in 22, in a newly districted seat, and they didn't even want to fight for it. They didn't even want to try, the Democrats, that is. They didn't even want to give it any kind of effort, gave her $10,000. So I reached out to her to be like, it's a plus 20 red district. I'd love to coordinate with you and figure out some way, because she obviously knows all of the Democrats in Jacksonville, which is our big metropolitan area. Mm-hmm. I wanted her help. I wanted to work with her, and she never got back to me. So I decided, okay, fine. Well, I guess I'm going to figure out the FEC requirements, figure out the Florida ballot requirements, and put out my name and got everything set up so that I can run. Come to find out later, she decided to run too. And I tried to reach out to her again. So she's on the Democratic ticket again. I tried to reach out to her again and say, look, a Democrat's not going to win here. It's just not going to work that way. And nothing. I haven't heard anything from her. And it was in good conscience that I tried. But someone's got to do something, because we've gotten to the point in this country where, especially I'm running ads and I'm getting so much vitriol from people who are saying that I'm a spoiler, saying that it's a waste of time to run. But I just want people to understand across the country, because I can't do this alone. Even if I got voted in, I'd be one vote out of 435. I can't change everything, but I can run, and I can show people that it is possible to run as an independent. Look at your state rules or whatever, but I can tell you the FEC requirements for the national requirements, they're not that bad. So I want people to see through my running that it can be done. It is possible. And you just have to get through the noise of backlash and be willing to take it. Because I've had some very interesting conversations that I never thought I would have, with people telling me that I shouldn't be doing this, and I'm ruining someone's life somehow because someone may vote for me and then the Republican may lose. It's just like, people need to get over themselves and look at the policies and look at the candidates. And yeah. I just want people to be able to see that it is possible to be done. That simple as that, so that we can hopefully get to a better place. And looking at Dennis Kucinich run, looking at Jose Vega, it would only take a few of our voices. We just saw, well, Force the Vote was a complete wash, but we just saw with the Republicans, it only took, what was it, 10 or 12 of them to rock the House, to absolutely bring it to its knees and get all of their demands.
Yeah.
So if we had actual independents who were in there, and we had 10 or 12 of them, just independents who don't take corporate money, and we drew a hard line. We work with who is doing the right thing, and we work against who's not doing the right thing. Just a handful of us could get actual policy actually on the floor. It may not pass, but we could force it to happen. We could force the conversation, and it wouldn't take that many of us. And a lot of people feel that that is impossible. And we need to get people over that hump, get people to realize that it is possible. We can take our government back. And if we did it in the Senate, it would only take 3 or 4 senators, maybe, if that, to completely shift the narrative in our country. So that's why I'm running.
Well, thank you very much for that. Actually, just as a reference, what Matt Gaetz did to Kevin McCarthy really was a huge eye-opener for many people, because a lot of us, so as somebody, I am on the left, one of the things that we pushed was forced to vote. So if anybody remembers, it was actually talked about first, oh my goodness, I'm blanking on his name, but he was a football player for the San Diego Chargers. And he was somebody that supported Bernie and Medicare for All. And so he proposed to somebody like AOC and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, well, why don't you just force a vote on the floor? And so this caused a huge back and forth on Twitter about forcing the vote. So then people like Jimmy Dore got on board, and they hosted what we call a force to vote town hall, which we basically, the left coalesced and said, we need to force a vote for Medicare for All on the floor vote. And we will withhold our votes for confirming Nancy Pelosi as speaker unless she concedes to put a floor vote for Medicare for All on the floor. And so despite the left coalescing around that, the Congressional Progressive Caucus did not follow suit. And so therefore, they just fell in line for Nancy Pelosi. But you have people who are watching, who are on the outside looking in, and you saw people like Matt Gaetz, who did the exact same thing against Kevin McCarthy and got many concessions for the House Freedom Caucus for what they wanted. So Matt Gaetz and Republicans actually proved what we wanted to happen, happened. And then when Kevin McCarthy did not do what they wanted, then they ousted him as speaker, and they were successful in doing so. So the thing is like what you're saying as well, Todd, is absolutely true. Is the fact that you don't need very many, and the fact that you mentioned yourself, Dennis Kucinich and Jose Vega, that are running as independents. And what if there are some that are running third party that you guys can coalesce around as well in order to be able to force a vote on, let's say, stop arming Israel, right? You could do something like that. But the thing is that there is power in that small number, and I think that's one of the importance of also running outside of duopoly, because you're not under that weight, right?
Well, if you look, what was their payback? What was their payback for falling in line and voting for Nancy Pelosi? Look at every one of them. They just tried to primary every single one of them. Yes. They won against Jamal Bowman. They won against Cori Bush. Ilhan Omar, she kept her seat, but I think she's fit for that district. But they primaried her, and she was just posting yesterday when the DNC convention started, just posting how wonderful it was to be at the DNC convention after they just did that to her. That's disgusting. What kind of how do you sleep at night if you can accept that and just say, well, this is the party, this is what I've got to do? And it kills me. It absolutely kills me to see that happen. And Jamal Bowman was doing the same thing. Within a week of his primary, he was coming out and shilling for Democrats again. after they endorsed his opponent. It makes me sick. It truly makes me sick. There's no victory to be had inside the Democratic Party. There's just not.
Yeah. And the crazy part is like, you know that your party doesn't like you.
Exactly.
And your party does not believe the same thing you believe. This is the wildest thing to me, is how can you be in a party that does not share your same values? Because my thing is, the values of the party are in the tangibles that you actually push through. It's not in, oh, this is what we aspire. This is what we believe. No. What did you actually pass?
Exactly.
What tangibles did you do for the people? That's the actual policy, right? So people always go to me and go, well, the Democrats believe in, I don't care what they believe in. There's a lot of rapists that believe out there and consent. But when the time comes for you to consent, they don't believe in it when the rubber meets the road. The same thing with the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. They actually do not believe in actual policies that they say they represent.
Well, they're running on abortion again. 2008, Obama ran on that. And then he came out within a few months after he took office and said it's not a top legislative priority. Meh, whatever. They knew it was coming. The Republicans have said that they were going to overturn Roe v. Wade. They've said that for decades, and they promised, and they kept their promise. They've been saying, they've told us, this is what our game plan is. We're going to get all of these judges. We're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. That's our plan, and they ended up doing it. And the Democrats have been promising for decades, we were going to codify Roe. We're going to make sure that it, and then just gave up every chance because they always have their person who can't make it over the hump for the vote, right? They've always got the shill who they can say, oh, well, he's a centrist Democrat, so he's not going to vote for that. Brr, sorry. And it's every time they have that person, every time, conveniently, they have that person who's not going to allow it to pass. Even under Obama, when they had a super majority, they had enough people and they couldn't get rid of the filibuster because that would make it too easy to do things that people actually want. It's sad. It's sad to watch.
But one of the things,
sorry, I don't want to get frustrated.
Well, no, I applaud your frustration because that means that there's something here, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things that I actually am also frustrated with is the fact that Republicans will promise the moon to a lot of people. And let's be honest, they promise a lot, particularly to working and poor white people, for them only to sell them down the river. And I'm not just talking about these centrist Republicans like a Kevin McCarthy. I'm also talking about the MAGA Republicans that will promise them the moon. But then when it comes time to actually give up the goods for the people, they're giving it to the corporations.
Exactly.
And this is why I look at people like Donald Trump and I'm saying Donald Trump is actually playing all of you, because you literally have somebody that's buddies with the corporate parasites. They got their dude in the office. And my thing is, it's like, if you are thinking, well, Donald Trump is it, then you must think that Elon Musk is it. Then you must think that Bill Gates is it. Then you must think that George Soros is it. Because they're all buddies. It doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican, they all have the same class. And so that's the problem, that I look at people who say, oh, well, I'm going to vote for Trump. You're voting for somebody that doesn't give a crap about any worker. And we can talk about Donald Trump's racism and everything like that all day. But look how he stiffs workers.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're voting a conservative, he is nowhere near your values.
Well,
and that's me as a lefty talking about Donald Trump. He doesn't care about conservative values either.
Well, the thing is, and what's weird about this election is this could be a runaway for him. It could have been. I think it's really close now. All he had to do, because they tried to put a bullet in his head. Someone did. I don't know who. Someone tried to put a bullet in his head. All he had to do was come out at the RNC convention, instead of the hour and a half long rambling speech he did. All he had to do was come out and say, I forgive this kid. We can't live in a country where this kind of thing could happen. And this is how we're going to move forward. That's all he had to do. He could have done a half-hour speech and just said, this is the path forward so that we don't let this happen again. We can't live in a country where this happens. That's all he had to do. That was it. That was it. And even J.D. Vance, I'm not a fan of J.D. Vance, but the other day he did an interview and he was talking about abortion, and he was saying, if you don't like abortion, he's personally pro-life, whatever, but he was saying, if you don't like abortion, we should support policies that entice people to have families. And he talked about reinstating the child tax credit. Why don't they run on that? Just run on something popular like that and actually do it. And instead they want to do the back and forth. They're calling her a communist now, or Kamala a communist now. They're saying that she's a San Francisco liberal, blah, 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 whatever. She's a million miles away from a communist. It's ridiculous. The level to which they think that the voters, and actually the voters probably are that uninformed, but the amount of degradation in our political discourse, the amount of degradation in voters' understanding of what's really happening is sad to see. It really is.
Yep.
So we just need to get the word out there and get people to start to understand that we have two right-wing parties. They differ only in that they, on social issues, that at the end of the day, don't pay your rent and don't put food on your table. They're not arguing over any issue that's going to fiscally help or hurt anyone. And as a matter of fact, both parties will do the same things that will screw us over, because everything that screws us the hardest is bipartisan at the end of the day.
Yep.
So,
absolutely. So one of the things I want to do is I want to go over your, this is your website. So I want to go over your policy positions. So you give pretty much a overview of your history, and you're running in the 4th district. So let's go to the issues page, because I will, it's just like what my friend Afeni says. She said, policy is my love language. So let's go over it. So first off, you have the one that says end government corruption. So one thing I really like is that you actually share a video, but let me read this paragraph first so that people can get an overview. It says, it is estimated that the 2024 election across the U.S. will cost $10 billion. Who is paying for that? And what are they buying with that money? Citizens United and SpeechNow.org versus FEC were decided in 2010, and they equated money to speech and uncapped donation limits. It allows unlimited campaign spending through political action committees that can speak louder than our own citizens. Party leadership is decided not by leadership capability, but by fundraising capability. Party leaders bundle money and disperse it to members to control them. If you don't fall in line, we'll just run someone against you. This is true in both parties. Politicians in DC spend more time fundraising than governing. This has to end, and is why we need independent representatives. And then you give this video about legalized bribery. This was a brilliant breakdown, very easily digestible breakdown of it. So it basically,
I wish I could take credit for that video. That video was actually the award winner for submissions this year that were, God, I wish I could remember the Twitter handle, but they are essentially a Citizens United Twitter handle. Now it's going to bug me that I can't remember their name, and I wish I could give credit where it is due. But that was the winner for the video this year on Citizens United and SpeechNow.org.
Wow. If you don't mind, I would like to play it actually.
Yeah, please. Yeah, I love that video.
Yeah.
So you want to bribe a U.S. politician? Sorry, that's against the rules. So let's break the rules. And if we're going to break the rules, you need to know them. Bribery of a politician is illegal, or at least our legal system thinks it should be. There's 3 major court decisions that built up to the loophole we're going to use. Because a mistake was made along the way that legalized the bribery of any U.S. politician. Now, in a perfect crime-ridden world, we could just give money directly to politicians in exchange for something. Quid pro quo. But our first court decision in 1976 prevents that. Buckley versus Vallejo. The Supreme Court rules that it is constitutional to limit donations to political campaigns. Because if you can't give $100,000 to a candidate and you're limited to something like $3,000, that makes it very unlikely the candidate will do something for you. We've got senators accepting gold bars out here. Good luck bribing someone for $3,000. The limit also applies to political action committees, PACs, which take donations, then give the money to candidates. You, as of right now, can only donate $5,000 to a PAC per election cycle. But you're a millionaire, and you're looking to bribe someone. So 5K is just not going to cut it. 2010, Citizens United versus the FEC. The Supreme Court rules that as long as a corporation doesn't coordinate with candidates, there's no possibility of them corrupting candidates. That limiting the spending of a corporation to advocate for or against any political candidate is an infringement on free speech. The free speech of the corporation, of course. This overruled the 1990 Supreme Court decision that said it was constitutional to limit corporations' spending on elections, because if corporations could spend as much as they want to promote candidates, it would distort the political process. That's what the old one said. Thank God we fixed that, right? So now, corporations can spend as much as they like to help out a politician's campaign as long as they're not coordinating. But you want to bribe a politician, and you still can't donate any more than $5,000 to a PAC. Those limits are still there. So we need our third court case, speechnow.org versus the FEC, also in 2010. Almost immediately after Citizens United, with Citizens United ruling that independent expenditures by corporations have no risk of corrupting an election. Then neither do donations to those corporations. That's the logic. This is where the mistake was made. And if your donation has no risk of corruption, no risk of quid pro quo, then Buckley doesn't apply anymore. It's unconstitutional to stop you from donating as much money as you want to a corporation, and it's unconstitutional to stop a corporation from spending that money on their own. Important note, this wasn't a Supreme Court ruling. It never reached the Supreme Court because the Attorney General didn't think it would be important. So, if you set up a political action committee, but it doesn't coordinate with any campaign, any candidate, people can donate as much as they want. Those PACs are called super PACs. Try to pause here and figure out how you'd bribe a politician with these two.
So before I continue, one of the things I wanted to say as well is imagine how many of these billionaires have funneled this money through these super PACs that they own.
Exactly. Yeah.
Imagine, for instance, an Elon Musk or Harlan Crow or a Charles Koch that continuously funnels money. Now, we already know that Harlan Crow is very generous with his money when it comes to Supreme Court justices. So imagine what he's doing to congressional members, as well as anybody who may be running at state level, as well as municipally. You have all these different types of people that are donating millions of dollars in order to control a lot of these politicians. And quiet as this is kept, it's actually not that much that some of these politicians are actually doing favors for these people.
Exactly.
Maybe like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, and you're doing a favor for them. And I'm like, wait, what? You're going to do this political favor for this billionaire for only 30 racks? Are you kidding me right now? That's all it takes? Like, I mean, if you're going to be, if you're going to sell yourself, at least, do it for a higher amount.
Well, and what people don't understand, and what really peeves me, what really makes me angry, is people don't understand this is not donation out of the kindness of their heart. It is not. No. It is, and the video talks about it. You can't make an in-kind donation. You can't have a quid pro quo. But this is not just because they want a Republican in there. It's because they want a vote that's going to give them easier regulations. It's going to lower their taxes. It's an investment, and they expect a return from that investment. And people don't understand that. And then they get an email from a candidate who says, oh, well, you just chip in $20 or whatever. Well, you know what? As it turns out, that $20 isn't going to get you anything as just a normal Joe who maybe needs that $20 to get dinner. You know what I mean? And people still fall for it. And they talked about when as soon as Kamala announced, she had the donation rake in of 81 million or whatever that first day haul was. That's a stupid amount of money. That is a stupid amount of money. And especially when the Democrats, well, actually both, they get free advertising on TV. They were talking about the 2016 cycle was like $1 billion in free advertising for Trump. It's free. It's free to them in the major parties. Free.
Yeah.
And they're just hauling in normal working people's money. Bernie, the fraud lawsuit, where the DNC was just like, well, we'll do whatever we want. It's disgusting that people still think that giving to a politician is going to help them in some way.
Yep, absolutely. Let's finish up the video and we'll continue with the policies.
Tools. Because now it's easy. All you need to do is promise that politician you'll donate $100,000, maybe $1 million. Just not to them. You'll donate it to the super PAC that's running ads to advocate for them. All they have to do in exchange is give you a favor once they're elected. You know, something for something. And because the courts have declared that this could never, ever possibly cause corruption, you're in the clear. That is how our elections function, and have been since 2010. Now, to any normal person, that's a clear mistake. Because that's corruption. What we've been doing is corruption. It's bribery. It's what the law intends to prevent. There's no functional difference if the money you donate is going to a PAC or to the campaign. As long as it helps the candidate, you can use that to influence them. Quid pro quo. It's a clear oversight. This is why most of the spending on modern campaigns doesn't come from the campaigns anymore. It comes from super PACs. Super PACs funded by the rich to buy politicians. The solution is putting those donation limits back, and they can be, once the Supreme Court overrules the court that declared these limits unconstitutional. But until that mistake is fixed, this is your up-to-date guide on how to bribe a politician.
So basically, that is the video. Just want to give a huge thank you for that, for sharing that part, so that people know like how this works, because a lot of people just don't know. But one of the things I do want to share is continuing on in this was so here you have single issue bills. Says this is one of the policy positions that you have. It says one of the most nefarious ways that politicians pull the wool over voters' eyes is voting on bills that are packed together. Must pass legislation is full of pork. They're designed legislation to allow each yes vote to get something that they can go home and brag about while holding their nose on the issue at hand. Aside from the budget, each issue vote should be clean up or down. They even skirt the budget by continuing resolutions that are packed with pork. So this reminds me of the 94 crime bill. And Bernie Sanders reluctantly voted for it because it had the Violence Against Women Act in it. Yeah. And this is a perfect example of having a bill that you don't like, but it has something good in it. So you vote for something, even though you don't like it, it has something good that you want to pass in it. And now Bernie Sanders gets attacked for voting for the crime bill, even though the only reason why he did was because of the Violence Against Women Act in it.
That's how they get you. And I can't remember the name of the bill, but they always give them these catchy names like the Save Middle Class America, blah, 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 whatever bill. Aaron Bean, I saw a floor speech that he gave about that bill, talking about how it was going to help America's middle class and all of these wonderful things it was going to do. So I decided I'd read the bill because I know how to look it up on the interwebs and read a bill. So I decided to read through it, and it's got a couple of things that would have helped the middle class, but at least a third of the text in that bill was giving tax breaks to Taiwan and Taiwanese owned businesses in the United States. A third of that bill for helping America's middle class was giving tax breaks to Taiwan somehow. And he didn't mention that in his floor speech. That's really weird that they just squeezed that in there and called the bill not that. But they do that all the time. You just have to take the time and read the bills. And that's the other thing about this guy. So I had a conversation last week with one of his friends. And when I talked to him, he was like, I'm a friend of Aaron. I'm probably going to vote for Aaron, but let me give you some inside scoop. Well, he went up to DC on vacation. He got the congressional tour, and he was allowed to go into Aaron Bean's office. Aaron wasn't there, but his staffers were there, and they explained nicely, this is the desk where Aaron sits, and they pointed at his whip board. You know what a whip board is, right? Where the votes are falling out. Mm-hmm. Pointed at his whip board and said, this is where he sits, and that's the board he looks at to see how he's going to vote. And he was like, does he read anything that he's really voting for? And they were like, no, not really. That's crazy. And how many Congress people have that same system? They're like, I'm just going to vote on the party line, and they don't read what they're preaching. That blew my mind. And I was like, this guy says he's a friend of his and he's going to tell me that. It blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind that he said that. But that's what happens.
They're yes men.
Yeah.
That's basically what they are.
Yeah.
They're just holding the door open for the parasites to run roughshod in government.
Exactly.
Like, how in the world are you a senator or a congressperson and you don't read the bills? And this is why you have these 600, 700, 800, 900 page bills, and they don't read it. They just vote according to party lines without actually reading the bill.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. The rot is just it's sky high.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
You talk about stopping the DC revolving door. So here you're actually talking about how many people who are in DC, once they get out of office, they're in different boards, they're in lobbying positions, paid contributors. Like, for instance, I'm blanking on her name, but she lost her seat in Missouri, and then
Claire McCaskill.
Yeah, Claire McCaskill. Thank you. Yep. Claire McCaskill lost her seat, and then she was able to get a spot as a contributor on MSNBC.
To tell Democrats how to win after she lost her ass.
Right. That's like, wait, hold up. Let me, so y'all can see my face. That's like Juan Guaido being hired to tell people how to win an election.
Exactly. Yeah.
He didn't win. Oh my goodness. Moving on. So basically stopping that revolving door, which is a great policy. And then accountability to voters, not donors. You say that you will never take PAC money, and you're running for the people of the district. So you basically said, if you ever break the pledge, just fire you.
Exactly. Well, I'm retired Navy, and I'm 100% disabled. My bills are paid. I don't need the money. You know what I mean? I don't understand why you would join government to get rich. It's disgusting. You shouldn't go in there normal middle class and come out a millionaire. What kind of government is that? So and as a matter of fact, I don't know if you know how much they get paid. They get paid like $15,000 a month. That's $175,000 a year to be in Congress. And I don't need that money. I'm going to donate that money. Anything obviously I'm going to have to live in DC, so that'll be a few thousand, but the rest of it I'm going to give away. I don't need that money. I don't need it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, people who go up there just to get rich that's the worst kind of politician you could ever have.
Yeah. Well, that's why they're in politics, so they can get rich, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's continue on. I would like to go to this next policy position. So after in government corruption, you talk about protecting free speech.
Real quick on that, before we leave corruption, I have a note in there. We have to address that before we can have a conversation about any of these others. We have to. I mean, is it on there? Well, yeah, there you go. Every other issue I have on this page means nothing if we don't end the corruption.
Yeah.
Because we can't have an honest conversation about any real policy until we get the money out of politics. Simple as that.
Yeah. I like on the last part you said we need to ensure that the $1.2 million that Aaron B has, quote unquote, raised this cycle doesn't get one more vote in the House. and then you
Exactly.
link to open secrets.
Yep.
Yeah. So
A lot of people don't know that exists. They don't even know that they can look that up.
Oh yeah, and here's the thing: I reference open secrets all the time on this channel. We talk about, because the thing is, a lot of people don't know who their politicians are really paid for. If the person who pays you the most is the person you're employed by,
Exactly.
and if you're not the ones paying them the most, then they're employed by somebody else. All right, so let's go on to protect free speech. Then you talk about free speech. One of the things that you talked about was, what they did against Julian Assange, which also is, something that I think that people need to think about when it comes to press freedom. So I really appreciate you talking about Julian Assange. You also talked about Gonzalo Lira, as well as you talked about Gonzalo Lira, and I think you talked about somebody else. You talked about the people who were actually protesting Cop City, and people who got RICO charges too.
And that was the same grand jury that indicted Trump, the exact same one.
Yeah.
I mean, and people think that those are separate issues. That's the same thing. That's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, just a question about, have you heard about the recent indictments against people like Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, the Uhuru Movement, him, Jesse Abel, and Penny Hess? They're also being indicted against for conspiring with the Russian government, even though that is a bunch of baloney.
It's ridiculous.
Conspired with the Russian government.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But the thing is, and this is what I'm truly, truly scared of, is now they've got rules in the books where they can just say you're a domestic terrorist and they can throw you away, throw away the key, just lock you up. And looking at, you obviously follow all of the union things. You know that Sean Fain, when they did the UAW strike and they negotiated their contract, they said that it was going to expire on May Day 2028. Mm-hmm. And you've got other unions out there who are renegotiating their contracts, getting an expiration date on May Day 2028. Well, that's 4 years away. And on the path we're on, is a general strike going to be even legal in 4 years? Right? Because now we can't even protest our government. Now we can't even go out and protest. They're arresting kids on the college campuses for the pro-Palestine protests. They are doing all of these things to try and make striking as impossible as they can. In 4 years, can we have a general strike? Is that putting the goalpost too far out there? I mean, and I hate to sound all conspiracy or whatever, but it feels like that's the path that we're going on. And that is scary as hell. And people should be frightened of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And people like Ron DeSantis, who is really anti-free speech. I don't care what people say. If you're trying to limit the amount of what people can practice their First Amendment rights in the streets, then you're anti-free speech. And that's what people like Ron DeSantis is doing as well. And a lot of people don't realize that, and he'll try to tag it to, the woke mob. We got to control the woke mob. Thing is, the minute you start to control the woke mob, guess what? Your speech is also being controlled too.
Exactly. And the thing that people don't understand, and I've had so many arguments with people over this, because I'm pro-Palestine. We need to end the genocide. It is a genocide. And I would come out and say things like that, and I would come out in support of the protesters and say we shouldn't be arresting them. And then people would come at me and I'd tell them, we need to protect the speech that we don't like the most. Because I took an oath to the Constitution. I did it several times when I was in the Navy. And I believe in the Constitution. And if we cannot stand up and protest our government anymore, if they make that illegal, then what are they going to do next? And what's going to happen when the government gets so far gone that in our police state, which it is a police state, we can't do anything about it. Now our Constitution is just ripped to shreds, and that's scary. So whether you agree with the kids on the college campuses or not, you should be fighting like hell to make sure that they can go out there and protest. Because what happens when the government comes to take your guns? You going to protest? Are you going to protest? Are you maybe going to have an issue with that? But they don't see that there is a conflation between those two things. So,
well, I mean, when it comes to free speech, look, I just talked about the report on how they're actually trying to go over the material in college campuses that to them are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, right? It could be a question, and it could be the wrong answer to a question. Like one of the questions was, Israel is the source of terrorism. Well, we know that that's not true, but the problem is that just the question being asked, even if it's a wrong answer, is considered anti-Semitic. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are we taking our cues from a foreign government? Because if we were to say, oh, well, the source of terrorism is Iran, would that have gotten as much pushback from the government, from the floor, from Tallahassee? Yeah, and so the thing is, like, I feel like, when people talk about, oh, we have to defend Israel, and I'm just like, well, wait a minute, Israelis aren't the only demographic that live in this country that, people, what about the Chinese? What about the people what about the Palestinians who live in this country?
Exactly.
What about the people from France? Are we going to be, fighting on behalf of France? Are we going to be fighting on behalf of Italy? What about Venezuela? So my thing is just like, is we're always, it's like, are you America first? Are you Florida first?
Yeah. I mean, and people, like I said, the way that we are brainwashed into our little neat boxes that we all fit in, apparently, and there's only 2 boxes. We're brainwashed into not having a discussion about these things. I can't go and talk to someone and express my true opinion and expect to have a normal conversation if they don't agree with me. They're just going to say, well, you're a Trump supporter, or you're a communist, or you're whichever side they're on. If I disagree with them, our discourse is just, it sets you up to be angry. It sets you up to be, is that feedback on my end?
I'm sorry?
Did you hear that feedback?
No.
Okay. But it sets you up to be argumentative, and it sets you up to be on your team, and you can't consider any other options.
Absolutely. Let's move on. I want to talk about, even though you are a veteran, I really appreciate that you said reduce defense spending. So you talk about how Afghan and the war in Iraq cost us $1.79 trillion, and it's estimated to reach $2.89 trillion, which including veteran, medical, and disability care in 2050. So, and you talk about, we have over 800 military bases around the world. We are sending our poor and middle-class youth overseas to kill poor and middle-class youth there for military industrial complex profit. I love that you say everything as bluntly and plainly here. This is the reason why we have wars, because it is a for-profit business. And I appreciate you putting this out there.
Well, anyone who says protect our troops that doesn't follow that immediately up with then bring them home, then why are they sitting? The 2 that we just lost from South Georgia, they're just up the road from me. The 2 that were lost in Jordan. Why are we in Jordan? Why are we there? Why do we have a base there? And it's because we're protecting the oil fields in Syria, because we need to cripple that country for whatever reason so that we can take their oil. And those 2 kids, they were sent home in caskets. They flew into Jacksonville, and they did a procession going all the way up to Georgia, because they were from Waycross, I believe. But they went through my district, driving them in caskets and boxes home because they were killed because we're trying to steal oil from another country. And there were people lined up on the streets thinking it was all patriotic, that these were heroes. That's sad. That's just sad that that's where we are, because people don't understand why we are doing what we're doing.
Now, as a veteran, I want to ask you this because I don't want to be disrespectful. But in my view, it feels like these young people that are going to fight abroad, they're much less heroes, they're more victims.
Yeah.
For the system. Am I wrong for saying that?
I think it's true. And I will tell you, when I joined just because I got into the nuclear power program, and I was like, I get to go and run a reactor, which was totally awesome. And I was on submarines. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Yeah. And I was on submarines, so I was never in the desert. I never had to kill anybody, thank God. But the people, when I come home and I'm standing next to a Marine who really was in the mess, and people look at the two of us and say, thank you for your service. To me, that's not, don't thank me. Because it's not done. Because like I said at the very beginning of this, the country that I thought I was serving is not here. It's not here. It's an idealistic version of a country that we are sold so that we go and play military, so that we don't turn into that shithole country. When we come home, we realize that it is a shithole country, and that they don't take care of us when we get home. And again, I wasn't in the worst of it, but the people that I've met who have been, they are treated horribly, and they are messed up for the rest of their lives. And there's no giving that back to someone. There's no giving that back. So
sorry,
go ahead.
No, I referenced in my head the quote from a member of the Orlando chapter for RBN. So we do mutual aid here in Orlando. But
you need a Jacksonville chapter, by the way.
You
need a Jacksonville chapter, by the way.
Yeah, we do. But one of the things that she said, because she's a physician with the VA, she said that the VA is actually on a hiring freeze. And in that hiring freeze, a lot of their medical personnel is actually being overworked right now because there's a hiring freeze, because they don't have enough personnel to be able to take care of our veterans. And the way our veterans are being treated right now is they're basically throwaways, because you're treating people who don't go out into the battlefield, who are owners of the Raytheons and the Lockheed Martins and the Northrop Grummans. You're treating them better than you treat your own people who actually fought for the country. And I think that's absolutely horrid. And the fact is that it's because, the people who are part of the military industrial complex actually own our government. It's just sad.
Yeah. And we're just pawns in their game. And why can't we take that money and say, you know what? Because being in the military, the best deal we get is we get the VA loan, which is a zero down payment mortgage, right? So we get the VA loan and we get the GI Bill so we can go to college. Why can't we say, instead of joining the military, and I've heard Jose talk about this too, instead of joining the military, why don't we have a civil service where you can learn a skill, like a skill building things here, build a community here, and we will give you the same benefits as if you were in the military. We're going to give you a VA loan. We won't call it VA. We'll call it some civil service loan or whatever. And we'll allow you to go to college. People want cheaper housing. People want free college. Work for the country. Civil service. Why can't we have that? Why do we spend over $1 trillion a year exporting death and destruction, and we have no money to spend here? And like I said, my hometown, it's a stop on the interstate. It's gone to complete crap because the factories moved out because NAFTA, and everyone in that town, everyone was lifted up by the factory. All of the small businesses were lifted up because there was just money in the town. Does that make sense? It was just everything was better. Not everyone had to be in a union, but since we had it there, everyone was lifted up. Yeah. Why can't we do that? Why don't we think that way anymore? Why do we worship corporations that are just, I mean, it's slavery. Richard Wolff, his interview last week with Jim Dore, I watch Richard Wolff all the time. But that interview where he was talking about how we've gone from slavery to feudalism to capitalism, and capitalism is really just neo-feudalism, because we have the billionaire club that we have to worship, and we have to join our house and raise our flags or whatever for the billionaire that we're backing. And at the end of the day, they're not going to do anything for us. We're just team Elon, or we're team Trump, or we're team, you know what I mean? It's the exact same place. We're in the same place. We've gone 1,000 years and we're in the same place again.
Basically, let's move on to the next one that I wanted to get to. So diplomatic foreign policy solutions. So you talk about the fall of the dollar, particularly the petrodollar, since the 1970s. And now we are, for all intents and purposes, entering into a multipolar world. You have BRICS, which stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But now there are other nations that have joined in. I actually reported on
13 now.
Yeah, 13. So that's why I call it BRICS Plus now. But yes, the only one that became a part but then pulled out was Argentina because of the election of Javier Milei. Of course, that was, in my opinion, idiotic, because now look at Argentina. Argentina is going in shambles now because of Javier Milei's austerity policies. But this is how you talk about the U.S. dominance. And so one of the questions that I have in regards to this particular point that you talk about foreign policy solutions is, can you talk about the routes that could be taken to not be isolated in a multipolar world?
Well, the first thing we need to do is stop using sanctions as a tool of war. Stop using sanctions with the intent of regime change. Stop using sanctions because when we do sanctions, like the people in Russia, it's the people who are suffering because of all of our sanctions. It's not Vladimir Putin. It's the people of Russia, or it's the people of Iran, just the normal people. And they know that the United States is doing that. They know who to hate. We're just making enemies out of millions of people by using sanctions in order to affect some diplomatic change. Mm-hmm. And the CIA calls it blowback, right? You do something and that's gonna cause more terrorists, or it's gonna cause more people who hate America, whatever. But it's blowback. We're seeing it because of the sanctions that we're doing, and we're doing them so haphazardly, and we're not doing them in a way that would, again, truly punish the person or the group of people that we think that we're punishing. It's punishing people at the bottom, and it's making us, even if we got back to the point where the U.S. dollar was dominant again, we would still have the same problems because we are making enemies everywhere because we've weaponized the dollar. That's why BRICS is coming about, is because we weaponized the dollar, and they were like, you know what, let's do something different, because now they're outside of what we can do with sanctions. That's the whole reason that happened. We did it to ourselves. So yeah, there's better ways.
So you actually make a great point. And I want to give a direct attention to this, because you talk about how tariffs hurt American consumers. You talk about regime change wars, but I want to focus on the immigration crisis, because we are in Florida. And of course, people like Ron DeSantis will talk about, well, they're coming to, we have this huge invasion coming on. They'll fearmonger about immigrants. And you talk about these sanctions, and just this paragraph actually really just hits home the actual underlying cause. So I'll read it here. It says, the refugees who are flooding our borders are often coming from countries that we have destabilized. Being angry at immigrants instead of the system that created the problem is narrow-sighted. Additionally, neither party wants to fix the border, since their donors benefit from cheap, undocumented labor, and it helps suppress wages for all Americans. Note that the border crossings really ramped up during the summer of labor, just as Americans were standing up and demanding to be treated and paid fairly post-COVID. It is interesting timing. So one of the things that I really applaud, because a lot of times, like you talk about how the CIA calls it the blowback, somebody benefits from that blowback.
Yeah.
And it's the corporations. They benefit from the blowback immensely, because when you sanction Venezuela, and this was talked about on one of Sabi Sab's voter panels, I think 2 weeks ago, when you sanction the hell out of Venezuela, it causes their public policy to diminish, so that people end up feeling like, well, I'm not being taken care of, I have to go abroad. So they will travel to their danger to the United States and become undocumented immigrants because of the sanctions that are happening in Venezuela.
Yep.
And as we ramp up sanctions in these countries, then these people actually come here. Because like someone said, I think it was Shahid Bolson, I think it was him, it might have been somebody else, but they said it is better to be behind the barrel of the gun to be in front of it.
Yeah.
Because even though they know that they're going to be persecuted here, it's better to be persecuted inside the empire instead of being persecuted outside the empire.
Absolutely.
So if you can speak to that a little bit too.
Well, there is vitriol against normal people who just want a better life coming into this country. Instead of propping up their countries and helping their countries, however their election turns out, because none of our damn business. It's not. Whatever happened in Venezuela is what happened in Venezuela, right? We should be supporting them because they're in our hemisphere. They're our neighbors. They have resources that we may want. We have resources that they may want. We may produce things that they want. Why are we not working with our neighbors? And if we just helped them to whatever extent we can, or just stop hurting them, they could stay at home. And then we wouldn't have this immigration crisis or whatever you want to call it. We're doing it to ourselves, and instead of righteous indignation at the people who are putting us in that position, people have righteous indignation against the people coming across the border who are just trying to do better for their lives, better for their families. They want to come here so that they can work, so that they can send a check home, because they're not coming here as whole families in a lot of cases. It's someone who's going to come here and work and send a check home. So that's taking money from here and sending it away because of our actions. Does that make sense? I mean, it's just, we're pissed at the wrong people. We're mad at the wrong people. Absolutely couldn't be more wrong at what we're doing. But then the same thing happens, and this is the other trip up that Trump did, saying that the immigrants are coming and taking black jobs, and everyone, all the Democrats were like, "I'm just going to my black job," not understanding that the immigrants come to lower wage communities, and those lower wage communities are typically black and brown communities, and they are affecting those countries more. That's what he was trying to say. Well, maybe that's giving him a lot of credit to say that's what he was trying to say, but that's essentially what's happening. And it's hurting our working class, our poor, our working poor, more than it's hurting anyone at the top. So, and then you're just supposed to hate your neighbor all of a sudden. It's not helping us, and we're angry at the wrong people. Simple as that.
Yeah. One of the things I also had a question in regards to the immigration crisis. You speak about the real source of this crisis. What would you do to ensure in the meantime that workers aren't undercut by employers exploiting undocumented immigrants?
I wish there was an easy solution for that. I truly, truly do. Because I don't want to be the person who says, if you've come all this way and you have a job and you're undocumented, we should just kick you out. You have to have some humanity in it. You do.
Yeah, I agree.
For right now, we need to shut down the border to whatever extent that we can. We need immigration. We're an immigrant country, but we need to shut it down to the extent that we can until we can wrap our heads around what's really going on and how many are actually here that we need to have a process for, whether that is a process to get them back home or whether it's a process to get them to citizenship. We need to lock it down, get a good count, and figure out our path forward, because we have to have a path forward instead of just a path that is arguing that one side is racist and the other side is super friendly when they both have kids in cages. That's not a beneficial argument. But at the same time, and you could look back to the 90s, you can look at the left, the proper left was against open borders too, right? You can look back at Bernie Sanders' speeches where he was saying, this hurts working Americans. We need to lock it down. And now you have a complete flip in which side says that immigration is bad. When stopping immigration or controlling immigration to a much higher extent is actually a leftist position. It really is. And we need to take back the narrative on that. We have to.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm heartened to think about is the fact that if you really wanted to slow the people who are coming here under duress, because that's what these people are coming here. It's not they're just doing it, pardon me for saying this, but they're not coming here for shits and giggles, right?
Yeah.
They're coming here because they're suffering in their own country due to what we're doing over there. And if you really want to slow that stream, then you have to nip it in the bud at the source, meaning stop it in sanctions, stop trying to undermine their elections and things like that. But,
stop the CIA from backing their drug cartels, maybe?
Well, that would also be a great solution too. But and one of my biggest issues is that a lot of times, a lot of the undocumented immigrants, and I think, and I blame the people, the corporate parasites at the top for this. A lot of people who are under duress, under no fault of their own, will come here undocumented, and then they will get treated slightly better than the rest of us who are poor and working poor. And then that creates a rift between the poor and working poor, particularly a lot of Black communities right now are actually upset at immigrants. Or really, they're not upset at immigrants, but they're upset at the immigration crisis.
Well, they're trying to recall the mayor in Chicago right now for this exact reason, because people are saying you're gonna put them up in hotels, you're gonna give them credit cards, and what have you done for us? Yeah. Where's our little bit?
Yeah. And my thing is like, if we're going to shut things down, which I can't say whether I'm for or against, because I feel like I don't want to shut it down until we actually stop what we're doing there. But at the same time, it needs to be shut down because I want the American people to fare better. But with that being said, then would you be for pushing for legislation that gives equal benefits to anybody who comes within the country? Okay, if we're going to start giving strollers to families who are coming across the border, all right, everybody else who's poor, we start giving strollers to them too. Or if we're giving a $400 a month, not credit card, but debit card to somebody who came here, then anybody who is, poor and working class in this country, no matter who they are, they're also going to get the same thing. Like, everybody gets a base, of support, not just people who are coming here undocumented, but also people who have been here, for people like my family that's been here since the 16 and 1700s.
Yeah. I mean, we can't, like I said, that's why they're recalling the mayor in Chicago is because of that dissonance between the two groups. And that's causing people to hate each other. It's causing an unfair balance. You know what I mean? It's like, I wish there was a perfect solution. I really do.
Me too. But that, it's kind of hairy either way you go. But I want to quickly move on to the next portion. Thank you very much for being very deeply honest about that one. You talk about fair minimum wage. So this one this is pretty much self-explanatory, but you talk about the cost of living increase for Social Security and BAH, which is military basic allowance for housing. And you said, well, why don't we do the same thing for just wages, period?
Exactly.
Have a cost of living adjustment. So according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, the wage in Florida you need to afford a 2-bedroom apartment is actually $35 an hour. I reported recently on how auto repossessions are on the rise, which is a huge indication of more people struggling. So, and then in 2023 last year, I think it was January 2023 last year, homelessness rose 12%. So can you speak to that phenomenon that's happening in your district?
Well, like I said earlier, we've got kids who grow up here and can't afford to live here. I go to like the local store, and I'll say, hey, by the way, I'm running for Congress, and they're like, oh, well, I only work here. I actually live in Georgia because it's too expensive to live here. That is more common than it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And for that minimum wage, like I said, BAH, and anyone who's not military probably doesn't understand, but every year BAH is calculated based on which base you're near, right? So kind of down to the zip code on what your BAH is going to be. And that's your basic allowance for housing. And it's adjusted a percent or a couple of percent every year. And it's always moving, right? So that's why I was saying, instead of just passing a number today, what happens if we go another 16 years, 15, 16 years without raising the minimum wage again?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just put into writing, we're going to make an adjustment every year, and the numbers for BAH, those actually, you start getting paid January 1st, but the numbers for what BAH is going to increase to come out in October when they do the calculations. It's the same for Social Security income. So any small business who's employing someone, they're going to know in mid-October what the new minimum wage is going to be on January 1st. They can make adjustments as they need to make adjustments. And once you've got that in place, then it doesn't have to be, because now I just had a lady who owns a small business, got in an argument with her because she was saying, well, we can't go from $7.25 an hour to $20 an hour. And I was like, well, that's because we haven't done anything in 16 years. And maybe if we had been consistently moving the line, then it wouldn't be such a shock right now. And she was like, well, it's going to put small businesses out of business. Well, if you can't pay a living wage, then maybe you shouldn't run a business. I'm sorry. I hate to say that, but maybe you're in the wrong line of work. And you shouldn't be hiring people that you can't pay. So, and the other thing is, I think it's somewhere between 10 and 15%. And then the number is probably higher because there's gig work out there that isn't reported the same, but somewhere between 10 and 15% of people have to have 2 jobs to survive. Mm-hmm. And that is, granted, it's a small percentage, 10 or 15%, but that's millions of people who the only way that they can put food on the table and a roof over their head is to have a second job. One of them probably full-time with crap benefits and the other one part-time, or 2 part-time jobs with absolutely no benefits. That's unsustainable. We can't keep doing this to our people and expect that we're not at some point going to end up with pitchforks.
Yep. Yeah. And it's horrible because I think a lot of people really need to see how, people will say, well, we can't afford it now at a minimum wage. If minimum wage goes up, prices have went up before, while the minimum wage is still the same as it is.
Well, if you look at what they just did in California, they went to, what is it, $20 an hour for fast food workers?
Mm-hmm.
And prices for a meal went up maybe a quarter. So that's nothing. That's nothing. And everyone was like, well, if you want to pay $20 for a Big Mac, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, that's actually not what happened. That's not what happened at all. But people are still complaining about them getting $20 an hour for fast food workers because they're just fast food workers. Well, as it turns out, if fast food worker is the only job you can get, you should be able to live doing that job. Maybe not be super rich or anything, but you should be able to live.
Yeah. Have the basics, right?
Yeah.
So I want to go into this as well. You talk about housing affordability. So this is something that's, I'll get to healthcare in a second, but I want to jump to housing affordability because
we're
I
in
think
Florida.
really, yeah. Well, unfortunately, here in Florida, that housing affordability is its own crisis in itself. But you talk about housing affordability, making housing affordability better. Especially focusing on the minimum wage. I'll be talking about housing in a little bit when it comes to the housing insurance industry that is really dropping off people who own homes. But one of the things that I wanted to also talk about was, again, the National Low Income Housing Coalition actually talked about $35 an hour you needed in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So how would raising the minimum wage help Floridian workers who are already struggling to pay rent? Because the thing is, a lot of times people will say, well, if you raise the minimum wage, then everything else is going to go up.
That's just, talk to any economist. That's not how it works. Just raising the minimum wage doesn't make everything go up exactly the same amount. It does not work that way. I'm sorry. But at the same time, what I brought up there in housing affordability, because I'm a realtor, so I see what happens. We've got new neighborhoods popping up around here all over the place. And there was a neighborhood, Wildlight, or over by Wildlight, which is our new big cool thing. Rayonier was kind enough to give a whole bunch of land so that they could get tax breaks and tax subsidies and all these fancy things when they were like, oh, we'll cut down some pine trees and let you build a neighborhood. Anyway, but there was a new neighborhood. I talked to one of the site agents there, and she said that she had just written a contract for 15 homes, not built yet, 15 homes, and they were going to make them rentals immediately. And that's not a one-off. That happened a lot over the last few years. People coming in and just buying houses cash with the intention of taking a brand new house and turning it immediately into a rental property. And you know why they do that? Do you know why they do that? I can tell you exactly why they do that. It's not for cash flow. It's for that tax write-off. So every house that they buy, there's a tax write-off. And I've owned rental properties, and I can tell you when I did my taxes, every year, on paper, I lost money. On paper, I lost money, but I still got a tax deduction for every rental property that I had. And I paid lower taxes, even though I was losing money on the houses, but I was putting money in my bank account every single month. Does that make sense? Does that really make sense? So what they're doing is they're taking all of that money and they're putting it into rental homes that they can depreciate over a 30-year period of time, and they're using it as a tax haven. All we need to do is get rid of that loophole, because that depreciation is, it used to be in there for, like, if you owned a restaurant and you went and bought a fancy oven for your restaurant, it would not be a fancy, nice oven forever. Right? At some point, that oven would degrade to the point where you need to buy a new oven. So that oven was a business expense, and you could depreciate it over a period of time because it was money you were putting into a business. And at some point, you would have to replace the oven, so you've depreciated it over that period of time. Does that make sense? So when you do that for a house and the property it's sitting on is an appreciating asset. It's not a depreciating asset. It's not going to be worth $0 in 30 years. But the way that they do that depreciation, by using it as like equipment, they are depreciating an appreciating asset and getting a tax benefit out of it. And that needs to go away. That has got to go away. If they want depreciation, and anyone who rents knows this for a fact, if you want depreciation, do maintenance on the house. Replace the windows when the windows need to be replaced. Replace the floors, update the kitchen. If you want to do those things and upgrade your investment, then you can write that off. Sure, if you do work to that house, write that off. But you shouldn't be able to depreciate it and do nothing to it. I can't tell you how many rentals I've gone into where they haven't done any work on it. The owners owned it for 10, 15, 20 years. They've never done any work to it. It's just a paycheck to them. And they've been depreciating it the whole time. And the rentals are disgusting places. but people need a place to live, so that's where they're going to go. So it bugs the hell out of me. It truly, truly does. So we can get rid of that tax loophole, and I think it will help a lot in the short term, because they're going to have to get out of those houses.
Yeah, that loophole definitely should be addressed. Definitely. One of my next questions actually is, many people who are making below what it takes to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida, they're suffering from the corporate price gouging that we've seen over the last 2 to 4 years. Would you be in favor of expanding the criteria for renters to receive rental assistance like Section 8 or other federal programs? And if so, would you endorse a statewide rent control measure?
Rent controls gets kind of tricky, but I would definitely try and make it more easy to access Section 8. And the other thing about that is that working at a company that has a rental department, when people call and they say, I finally got my Section 8 voucher after years on a waiting list in some cases. I got my Section 8 voucher. Do you have any Section 8 housing available? The answer is always, oh, well, we're not allowed to say, blah, 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 which means we don't have any. And why do people not accept Section 8? Well, it is the stigma that's been placed on that money. There's a stigma that says, well, if they're Section 8, that means they're poor. That means they're going to be criminals. I don't want them living in my house, which is horrible, because the people who are getting Section 8, again, they have to wait years sometimes to get that voucher. That means that they've been trying to do the right thing for so long before they finally get there. And then when they get there, there's nothing available for them. So we should make it a faster process to be able to get Section 8. And we should also have some kind of a public education about what Section 8 truly is. And it's not just drug addicts. It's not just criminals. It's not just super ultra poor people who'll never work. You have to jump through loopholes to get it. And people who are landlords need to understand that these people have put forth the effort to get to that place so that they would be more willing to accept it. And if they go in Section 8 and they do something wrong, they will lose that forever. You have to understand that they're not going to be the person who's going to come in and trash your house or come in and commit crimes, because they will lose that benefit that they have fought for forever. So we need to get rid of the stigma around it. We need to make it easier, and we need to get rid of the stigma.
Yeah. Finland actually has what they call a housing first model. So this means that you are insured a home. It's not some like big elaborate home. It could just be like an efficiency with a kitchen and a room, bathroom, and just basic amenities for people who are unhoused or who are housing insecure. Would you be in favor of, if a legislation came to the floor of the House to pass a housing first that is like what's going on in Finland, so that we can essentially get rid of homelessness? Would you be in favor of that?
Absolutely. And actually, I'm fairly certain, is it Mississippi or Alabama? One of the two of them has a housing first program, and it's not moving you into the Taj Mahal. But the thing that people don't understand is it's difficult to get into housing if you can't get a job. It's difficult to get a job if you don't have an address, right? Catch-22. So the reasoning, I wish I could remember which of the two states it is, but it's one of those that you wouldn't expect would have a housing first platform or a housing first law. But essentially it is saying, in order to get you on your feet so that you can be a successful member of society, or whatever, however fancy words you want to say it, we are going to make sure that you have a place where you can go and lay your head, where you can get a shower, where you can make your own food, where you can, and that works. And they've had ridiculous good success with it because it just makes sense. It's just good policy.
Yeah. So I have 3 more questions, and one of the ones I wanted to go to is, and I know I went way over my time, but I really wanted to get these
You're
questions
fine.
out as well. But you talk about union support. Oh, first, let me go to healthcare. This is really pretty much self-explanatory because honestly, it really is a no-brainer. You talk about how, you are for a single-payer healthcare system, correct?
Absolutely.
So this, and we have talked about the millions of dollars, the billions of dollars that we would save with a universal healthcare system here in the United States. I find it interesting that you talk about the insurance companies, health professionals, hospital and nursing homes, and pharmaceuticals also putting money into keeping universal healthcare out of the hands of citizens.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you highlighting this as well. And then you talk about why are businesses opposed to universal healthcare? Why should businesses embrace universal healthcare? And I think it is beneficial because it would not only save the country money, it would save the state money, and it would save us personally money because you're not spending that money on excessive fees like premiums, deductibles, and things like that. So instead, what your tax okay, so if your taxes would go up $250 a year, but you're spending $250 per month on private health insurance, I would rather spend only 1 month for public health insurance and still get just as good, if not better coverage, instead of paying $250 a month for an entire year and for them to just deny me, what I need.
Exactly. And the other thing is, and the reason that I wanted to put it in there, why businesses are against it, why they think it's a bad thing, and why small businesses in particular should be for it. If you are a small business and you want to hire a dozen people, are you going to be able to get a good healthcare plan for those dozen people? You're not. You're going to pay out the ass for it, and you're not going to be competitive with a big company that has a big block of medical. I can't remember what they call them, but they negotiate a huge block, so they can negotiate a better price than you're going to be as a small business.
Essentially, bulk pricing.
Yeah, it's like bulk pricing, but a small business, if we had universal healthcare, then a small business doesn't need to worry about how they're gonna pick up healthcare for their workers, and they don't have to try and get the Cadillac program to be competitive with a bigger business that has that Cadillac insurance system. You know what I'm saying? So a small business should be for it, and it would stop your healthcare from being tied to your job. You lose your job, you go and get another job, or you decide you want to leave your job and go and get another job. It can be months before your new healthcare kicks in. Months. What happens during those months if something goes wrong? So people are scared to lose their job, or they're scared to quit their job and go try something new because their insurance is tied to where they're working. How much more productive of a society could we be if people had the choice of mobility and jobs so that they could go and truly find something that they truly enjoy doing? How much more productive could we be if people had that ability to not have to fight for the good job with the good benefits, and we're just going to do it even though we hate it because we have to have insurance because we have a family and we need to make sure they have proper care? How much better can we be as a people if we just took care of our people?
Yeah.
And I think it's limitless.
Yeah. And one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is imagine how much better the country would be if people actually were able to get preventative care instead of waiting until they were too sick to actually, take care of themselves. And
people don't understand. It's more expensive to not have preventative care. It's more expensive for that person to go to the emergency room once it's too far gone, once it's too big of a problem. And when they go to the emergency room because they didn't have insurance, at an emergency room, they are required to provide care. Who's going to pick up that bill? Who's going to pick up that bill? Your premiums are going to go up. Your copays are going to go up. Your prescription costs or whatever. All of that is going to go up. You're going to pay for it. And everyone who says, I don't want my taxes to go up for them to have insurance, as it turns out, you're paying for it one way or the other. It's coming out of your pocket because someone's going to pay for it, and it's not going to be the hospital, and it's not going to be the insurance companies. It's going to be out of your pocket.
Yep. And preventative care is actually cheaper.
Way, way cheaper. Yes. Same thing with dentistry, right? People don't understand that if you just have a cleaning once a year, how much better that is for you. How much missing teeth kills your self-esteem, and how deleterious of an effect that is on your life. And it breaks my heart to see that happen to people, and it's just because they don't have the $50 a month or whatever for dental insurance, or you go and it's cheaper to pull your tooth out of your head than to give you a filling. So they just yank your teeth out. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. So dentistry should definitely be covered in healthcare, by the way, in case that wasn't clear.
Yep. Thank you so very much for that. Now, I want to go to union and labor support. So it says strong labor unions were the biggest backers for a lot of policies that we take for granted: the 8-hour workday to 40-hour work week and child labor laws. They have fought for unemployment insurance, worker compensation, on-the-job safety standards, and family medical leave. So you talk about how you support strong unions, and here's the thing. The Democrats will say that they support unions, things like that. But of course, just look at how Joe Biden treated the railroad workers union, right? He actually showed that to not be true. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you is unions are at an all-time low here in the United States, a little under 10% right now. In the state of Florida, the union representation among workers is even lower at 6%. So what measures would you push to implement more unions across the country, and more specifically Florida?
If I could get rid of every right to work state, that is such a lie that it is some super special right. And as a matter of fact, Florida is a right to work state. I don't know if you're aware of that, right?
Yeah.
That essentially says that if you go and work at a union shop or you go and work at a union factory, you don't have to join the union. Well, what's the point of the union? If you know what I mean, you're gonna get the benefits from it, but you don't have to pay any dues. I think it's just, that doesn't make any sense. And what I talked about in there is we need to understand that every commodity has a price. Every commodity is negotiable. If you produce more corn, then you're going to get a little bit lower price for your corn. If you produce more milk, it's a commodity, and it has to fluctuate. And unions allow us to take the commodity of labor and negotiate it. And people, one of the things I said on there, someone is not doing you a favor by giving you a job. You are doing them a favor by selling them your labor. Simple as that. We need to get out of the mindset that creating jobs and job creators are super good people and they're the best of America. That's bull. That's absolute bull. You are selling them your labor. And if you cannot come together and negotiate the price for fair labor, then we've already lost. If people if people don't understand that we are a commodity, our labor and our time is a commodity that must be fought for and must be protected, then they've already won. The billionaire class has already won. If they say, come and work for us, it's going to be a favor and we're going to create all these jobs, well, you're creating low-paying, part-time jobs with no benefits. You're not creating anything. You are underbidding labor from human beings. Simple as that.
Yep, basically. So I have a second question about union labor support. So worker cooperatives are basically businesses that are worker owned and operated democratically in a more horizontal fashion. The necessity for unions is eliminated due to workers' collective ownership. Would you be in favor and push this type of legislation that favors more worker cooperatives in the country?
Yeah, and actually that interview, Richard Wolff talked about it with Jimmy Dore, where essentially the government said, if you lose your job and you get together with 10 people, we'll give you money and you open a business. That's awesome. Why can't we do that? That's a great idea. Instead of paying you unemployment insurance, we're going to help you open a business. You guys all decide on what you want to do and open a business. And then we're not paying you unemployment insurance anymore. We're just giving you all of that up front so that you can start a business. Why can't we think outside of the box like that? Why do we have to degrade people who are on unemployment instead of trying to give them a hand up and try and make our society better? I think we need more small businesses. I think we need a lot more small businesses because we are so overrun with monopolies. There's a McDonald's in every freaking corner. There's a Walmart in every city that's taken all of the mom and pop grocery stores and run them out of business. Then you've got Amazon, which is a monopoly, which is shutting down every mall in this country. I don't even know if any malls still exist, but Amazon did that. Amazon did that. And all they're doing is taking wealth out of our small towns and transferring it up to whatever yacht they're going to buy next. And we need to take back our communities, and we need to do that through businesses. And if that's through opening co-op businesses, if that's through giving grants or loans or whatever to groups of people so that they can open co-ops, then absolutely I support that. Unions, like I said, unions are an opportunity to negotiate your labor to a company that already exists. But a worker co-op, I think, is far and beyond what a union is able to do.
Yeah, and one of the things I love that you mentioned was that we can either do grants or loans. I would say that, for people who are on a lower income spectrum, try to get them grants so that they can actually build a business. Really, this is democratization of entrepreneurship and creating more entrepreneurs within our country. But also, and shout out to Roger Meadows, who is a frequent viewer of this channel. One of the things he talks about is also right of first refusal, basically being when these companies want to sell or they're being taken over, there's an offer to be taken over by a bigger company. Instead of allowing that to happen, they get right of first refusal, meaning that the workers are offered to own the company instead of it being sold to a larger company. And so then if the workers do not have the collective money in order to buy the company, they can go to the NLRB and go, look, we want to purchase this company. Can you either give us a grant or a loan in order to buy it?
Absolutely.
And so the federal government gives them a grant or loan to buy that company because they get the right to either accept the company as they're on them or refuse it. And so then they're able to collectively own it. And then they can operate it democratically and then make all the profits of profit share among themselves, which also boosts all the workers, from the people who do all the cleaning to the people who coordinate things, throughout the company. So I think that's a great idea because I want to create more people who are worker ownerships, Yeah,
absolutely. And the other thing is, with respect to unions, I've had people come at me and say, well, unions are why we produce all of our stuff overseas now. No. That was not the union's vote. That was the vote of the corporate board who decided we're going to ship our stuff overseas because we can get labor for pennies on the dollar. It was not the unions that did that. It was never the unions that did that. But people blame unions for gutting our middle class and gutting the center of our country. They blame unions for that? Come on. Crazy.
That's what the corporate parasites tell you.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to jump on was this is a policy I did not see on your website that I wanted to ask you about. I did not see on their policy about reparations for American descendants of slavery. Mm-hmm. Now, as far as this, I want to share this fact about your district as well, because I think this is very important. So this is Congressional District 4. If you look at the racial makeup for the district is 30% Black. So one of my biggest questions to you about this is that, do you support cash reparations like the ones that were given to Japanese Americans for being forced in internment camps? And if you are in favor of reparations, cash reparations for American descendants of slavery, are you going to push legislation to pay for reparations to American descendants of slavery in Congress?
Lineage based, absolutely. Absolutely, I'm for it because it's a debt owed for unpaid labor. And we were just talking about labor, actually. It's a debt that is owed. As far as reparations because of the Jim Crow laws or for redlining or anything, that gets into things where you can't put a number on it. But cash reparations for the descendants of slavery, that is a number. We can put a number on that. We can calculate it out. We can say, what was it, 30 acres and a mule? We can calculate out. That's a number.
30 acres and a mule, yeah.
So that absolutely. And the only reason I believe that it hasn't happened yet is because they haven't figured out a way that they can take that and put it directly in your pocket and put it directly into someone else's pocket. Like just pass it straight through you to someone else and make profit on it. That's the only reason I think that they haven't done it yet, is because they haven't figured out how to monetize it yet, which is a disgusting way that our government works, but that's what we've been talking about. But yes, cash reparations, 100%, 100%.
Yeah. And I want to get this book myself, but it was by Dr. Sandy Darity, called From Pure to Equality. He actually wrote about he actually helped do the study of reparations, and talks about how the reparations amount would be somewhere close to or north of $15 billion. I don't want to exactly quote the amount, but it's north of $15 trillion. That's how much it would be. And a lot of people would balk at that. Oh my God, that's so much money, we can't afford it. And then I would go to the people who would say, okay, they did there was a failed audit for the Pentagon and they lost over $20 trillion. That money
just oops.
Yeah. And so my thing is, it's like, we actually can afford it. Number one, it doesn't have to all be paid in cash, in 1 year. You can actually make it in installment payments. Number two, we just have to stop giving money to Ukraine and Israel, and we can start getting reparations payments to American descendants of slaves. So,
make it some kind of an annuity or something that has a cash value each year or something. There's so many ways to do it, but to just flatly say we can't afford it, well, maybe take a mortgage out on the White House, because how was that built, right?
I mean, my people built it, so why not? That was actually a really smart position there. I appreciate that. So I'm sorry, I got two more questions. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about also disability. You said you're disabled. I personally am also disabled. Mm-hmm. And so according to 2020 and your census, and the 2020 census for District 4, I was actually looking at it, and you have a good chunk of your citizens are actually elderly. And so one of the things that I was thinking about, especially for those of us who are disabled and elderly, is that our disability and retirement payments are wholly inadequate. So my question to you is, in regards to increasing, first of all, would you be in favor of increasing the disability benefits and Social Security retirement benefits?
Yes. So those, we talked about COLA before, how they do a cost of living adjustment every year, but that is, I think it's been inadequate because it goes on general prices of things, not cost of housing, right? So a lot of people who are on a fixed income, the biggest issues arise, especially now here in Florida. The biggest issues arise when your monthly bills go up more than your COLA goes up. And homeowners insurance has taken a lot of people who are on fixed income and just made it unaffordable for them to continue living in whatever house that they are living in. What just happened with condos, I don't know if you've been following that here in Florida. Now they've passed a law after the collapse of, I can't remember the condo down in Tampa, but they passed a law and they said condos have to have reserves now. You have to have reserves in case anything like this comes up. You have to be able to repair it. So instead of saying here's some reserves or whatever, it's got to come from somewhere. So they're raising condo association dues. So now your monthly dues, instead of being $500 a month or maybe $1,500 a month, they're going through the roof because the condos have a certain amount of time to build up these reserves that they're required to have in the event that they have to do any big repairs. So a lot of people who are on fixed income, things like that will happen. And when those happen, if your fixed income adjustment, annual adjustment, whatever it happens to be, isn't enough, then you're just going to be kicked out of your house. And where are you going to go live? Where are you going to go live if you're 70 or 80 or older and you just cannot make ends meet? There's got to be some kind of a better system. There was a guy in Lake City. He was 91 or 92. He was retired Air Force. Mm-hmm. And they had raised the rates on the nursing home where he was staying to the point where his fixed income couldn't cover it anymore. And they kicked this veteran out of this nursing home. Kicked him out because he couldn't afford it, because they had raised the rent beyond what his fixed income was. So you can do it one way or the other. You can say you can raise the rent, but you can't raise it any higher or whatever than the fixed income adjusted. Or you can say we need to raise the fixed income. Well, I think that the easiest way is just to say it's capped. So you cannot raise rent, or you can't raise X, Y, or Z thing beyond what this person can reasonably pay with their fixed income. We have to take that into account. Same thing with people who are on disability, who are receiving Social Security disability. It's the same thing. If you're on a fixed income, there should be controls in place to make sure that you don't get thrown out on the streets. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, as somebody that was on disability, that's still on disability, I was living in a condo, and they had raised my rent over $200 in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And if anybody on this channel remembers, I actually got kicked out because they gave me 60 days to leave because they wanted to sell, because the HOA actually collectively owned my condo. And they gave me 60 days to leave. Me and my mother's elderly. She's in her 70s, to leave. And so we literally had to raise money in order for us to move. And now I'm in a new place now. But because of that, we had to move. And we were there for almost 11 years.
Yeah, that's tough. And like I said, there's got to be some way that we can protect people that are in situations like that. There's got to be some backstop to that, because whoever you were paying rent to, they didn't need that $200. They were charging it because they could charge it. You know what I mean? And that's the worst kind of people.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. So I have one more question that I would like to ask you. And this one's a pretty simple answer. Can you please explain the benefit of ranked choice voting?
Absolutely. 100%. And that would stop half of the emails I've gotten that are saying, well, you're just going to be a spoiler. We should have ranked choice voting. I think that would it would make it easier for third parties to actually come into power, or it would make it easier for people to make the decision to run, because I'm running. I don't think I'm going to win. I think it would be awesome if I won, but it's going to be really, 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 really hard to win. People can agree with me. They can agree with every policy that I put out there. They can listen to me talk, and they can agree with me and say, I would vote for you, but if I did that, then maybe the Democrat would win, and I can't do that. Or maybe the Republican, you know what I mean? We need to get over that. We need to move beyond that. If you look at every other developed country in the Western world, they have more than two political parties. We're kind of getting screwed here. We're kind of getting screwed. So anything that gives us the ability to have a viable, actual third party or an actual independent movement I'm for it 100%. The only thing that I put on there in my policy platform is those unfortunately are made at the local level. The U.S. House, I wish had control over it and I could go up there and vote for it. But the way that the elections are run to get to ranked choice voting is local.
Yeah. Definitely. So thank you so very much. There's many more questions that I could have asked, but due to the sake of time, I went way over, but I appreciate you being very long-suffering and patient with me through this process and answering all the questions. I really appreciate it. If you can let people know where they can find you, and if, what type of help that you need on the ground in order to get your voice out there more in your district?
So everyone can find me. My website is Todd TODD 4FORFL4 .com. So, and all of my socials are exactly the same. Todd for Florida 4. I wish I could say I wanted to take people's time or ask for donations or anything like that. I absolutely do not want that. I want people to be, and as a matter of fact, my donation page says give money to local charities and mutual aids. I don't need your money. I don't want your money. Tell people that I'm running. When you go and donate to a charity, tell them you're donating because I sent you, or because I said that maybe donating was better than donating to a politician. So I just want to get the word out there that there is a different way to build community. There is a different way to choose our representatives. And I truly, truly hope that I can open eyes to people that say, or to show that this can be done. It's not impossible to do outside of the two parties.
All right. Thank you so very much, Mr. Todd Schaefer, for joining me. Of course, if you guys are in Florida, you guys, even if you're not in the 4th district, you guys can let your family and friends know who may be in the 4th district that Todd Schaefer is running as an independent. He's not tied to the two-party system. Thank you very much, Mr. Schaefer, for joining me.
All right. I truly appreciate it. Have a great day, man.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye. All right. So, that was a long one, but I wanted to get through as many of those policy points as possible because it is important to know the policies that they are for. You have to know what you are voting for, not just what you're voting against. Because the thing is, we could have spent the entire time talking about how bad a Democratic person who's running is, or how bad the Republican who is the incumbent is. We could spend all day on that. But the thing is like you want to inspire people. You want to let people know what could be. Well, then you have to let them know what you're for. And you have to vote for what you're voting for. And so, this is why I am, trying to highlight anybody that's independent or third party on this channel. You don't see Democrats or Republicans on this channel. You just don't. So, and I try to make it my business to highlight people who don't get highlighted, to amplify those voices. So if you guys would like to, you guys can go ahead and share this video among anybody who lives in Florida, or people who may not live in Florida, you never know, they could have family in Florida that may be in the 4th district that's, near Jacksonville. So go ahead and give this video a share, and please keep to informing people and making sure that your fellow voters are informed. That's important. Go ahead and give the stream a like. Thank you so very much to everybody for watching. Let's get into the chat, and then we'll get into the next segment. So let me go here. We're going to go into the Rockman first. And if I have any Rumble rants, then I will check on the Rumble side too. All right. Thank you very much to Anna Mayer. Says, this is exactly what's happening here in Iowa with John Deere. My neighbors are all out of work now, and there are no jobs equivalent to replace them. Makes me very sad. Yikes. That is definitely bad that's happening out there in Iowa. There's a lot that's going on out there too. They're also implementing child labor laws. They're gutting child labor laws again out there in Iowa. It's pretty sad to see. So let's go to, we're good on the Rockfin side. Let's go into the YouTube side and the Twitter side as well. So we have Bryce coming in saying, morning all, good to see you, Bryce. We have Jacqueline coming in saying, hey, Jaybefaunt and Bryce. Wardy coming in saying, hey, everybody. We have Roger Meadow says, Todd, TRICARE is superior to Medicare for all. Sponsor a bill to extend it to everyone. Call it TRICARE for all. Thank you very much. I meant to share this, but I completely forgot. But thank you very much for that, Roger. Casey says, Democrats equal Republicans with rainbow flags. That is true. Fired Play says a big part of the bribery includes all the people who get paid with these dollars, hush money. Yep. Nick Cruz, my brother from another mother on RBN, says, what's good, James? What's good, Nick? Good to see you. Nick is also out there in Chicago right now. He's going to be speaking at the workers' strike back rally in Chicago, protesting the DNC convention. So please make sure to tune into that. I will be playing his speech later this evening as well. So I will share that. In fact, while I'm talking about it, let me share this right now. Tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, I will be live talking about the DNC convention. I will be reacting to the speeches along with Katie Lewis will be joining me a little bit later at 9 p.m. But we're going to be reacting to it because I think it is important to see and debunk what they're saying. I did this with the RNC. I'm doing it with the DNC. We're keeping it all equal here because both parties are full of BS. So we're going to be getting into that later this evening. So also, Roger Meadows says, open secrets don't go far enough. Some industries they point out are very vague, like lawyers. Also, they only speak on federal politicians, not state and local. I agree. I think they should do more state and local politicians too. I agree. I think they should go further into, because you want to know how deep the rot goes, you know? I appreciate that. Fired Play says you can't shut down the border and continue destabilizing countries. You have to stop destabilizing first. I agree. I meant to ask this question too. He said, Roger Mel says, do you support E-Verify? Appreciate that. Emoji says discussions are why I love RBN. Thank you so very much. Roger Meadow says provide tax subsidies to small to mid-sized businesses, mom and pop shops, and starter worker co-ops to cover 85 to 100% of their labor costs. Subsidy shrinks as company grows. That's actually a really good one too. You know, the bigger the company, the less help that they get, essentially. And small businesses, they get a lot of assistance because the thing is, you want them to reach, go get past that 7 years, right? Because typically, they end up going out of business within the first 7 years. If you can get them past that 7-year hump to when they start to go to a decade, and then you help them along the way, and they are getting help from the federal government for a time. And then once, it's like taking the training wheels off. You know what I mean? It's like that. So thank you very much for that, Roger. Kelly Lane says Aaron Bean is sponsored by IPAC. Big surprise. Yep. See, our government is taken over by these people who are really just, they're compromised because they're being controlled by foreign governments. It's sad, but that's the way it is. Dwayne says, Chris, we're all neocons now. Matthews got Phil Donahue fired from MSDN CIA for opposing the Iraq invasion. Chris Matthews is a character. Geez, I can't with him. So we're going to be moving on to the next subject. And let's go to this. So we're going to be going into the next segment. Collapse incoming. So this is going to be a big one. I think that you guys really should. I really think you guys should take this one into heart, especially if you live in Florida. But this is not just limited to Florida. This is also could be indicative nationwide for. This can be indicative nationwide for what's going on in your state. So please keep in mind what potentially could be happening. Nationwide is not on your side. So as we know, there is a collapse incoming when it comes to really housing insurance in the state of Florida. Housing insurance really is in a kerfuffle, as we see in this article, this presentation from More Perfect Union. Those of you who are homeowners need to keep this in mind. Some of you already know what's going on. But one of the questions I actually have for you is, did you know that we had a insurance public option for home insurance here in Florida? Not many people knew that, but we're going to be talking about that and more when it comes to the insurance companies really stiffing homeowners here in Florida. Let's get into this. I found this very interesting to get into. Talk about the Florida insurance industry out of More Perfect Union. We're going to be pausing from time to time to react and also bring out different points. But let's go.
We got told we had to move in a hurry.
Times of distress, I have a tendency to be rather sarcastic because I always say I'd rather laugh than cry. And that was kind of one of those situations where you're literally throwing all your belongings to the street at one time. You're not being evicted and your wife's not kicking you out of the house.
Maurice Gutierrez lives in Naples, Florida. His house flooded in 2022 when Hurricane Ian made landfall on the southwest coast of Florida.
One of the strongest September hurricanes to strike the U.S. in decades.
Significant storm. Again, a Category 4.
The street will never be the same. You know, trees gone, neighbors gone, homes are gone. And here I am today rebuilding because I won't move. I love this place.
A year later, Maurice got a notice from his insurance company. They were doubling his premium to $7,500 a year. The year after that, it was up to a staggering $9,000 a year.
Now, on a fixed income retiree, that's not chump change.
So Maurice decided to drop his wind coverage. Now he's one of hundreds of thousands of Floridians that are going bare. That means they're living with little to no homeowners insurance in a state that is set to have a record hurricane season this year. And what's going on in Florida under Governor Ron DeSantis is a warning. This is what happens when a government capitulates entirely to the insurance lobby. We went to Florida to talk to other homeowners like Maurice. We found out that residents are being priced out of coastal communities, and sketchy insurance companies are thriving under DeSantis's policies.
It's essentially trickle-down economics, but for insurance companies.
And the housing insurance crisis isn't just a problem in Florida.
People around the Bay and across the state are now being told their homeowner insurance policies will not be renewed.
State Farm says they're discontinuing coverage for some customers.
Several major carriers are pulling out of Iowa and other states.
Experts warn the collapse in the homeowners insurance industry could take down the entire housing market with it.
Should those systems start to collapse, or should that business model collapse, it could take down the entire American economy with it. It could take down the global economy.
That's huge. That should be concerning to all of you. The fact that we have these people, these corporate parasites that are making money off of the insurance on your homes. And now that when you actually do need them, they're saying, you know what? You're too risky. We're pulling out. Think about that. Think about if you live in California, you have the wildfires that could be happening. Think about if you live in Tornado Alley within the Midwest. Think about whether you're in the north of Midwest, whether you're in places like Wisconsin, Michigan, right? You could be, living there and, you have to face big blizzards, right? Or think about whether you're in places like Maine. Think about what happened with Superstorm Sandy if you live in New York. Think about that. And now your housing insurance either goes up so much that you can't afford it, so you have to drop them, or they drop you. And imagine if that happens to enough people. Ah, boy. Let's continue.
The water came up to this line right here. At first, it's like, it can't get much worse. It can't get much worse. And then it's like, oh my God, when is it going to stop?
Maurice has lived in Florida for most of his life.
Raised in Miami, so hurricanes to us are, as far as I'm concerned, a weather event. You know it's coming. You prepare. You don't get complacent, but you get used to them.
Nearly.
Now, what he says is true, because those of you who live in Florida, I don't get concerned with hurricanes until it's a Cat 3. Everybody's like, oh my God, a hurricane's coming. And I'm like, what category is it? A Cat 1? Oh. Hurricane party. Cat 1, It's like, okay, here's how it goes. Category hurricane, meh. Category 2. Category 3. Category 4. Category 5. Oh shit. That's basically how it is in Florida. Just a little Florida logic for y'all. But Cat 1s and 2s, yeah, we don't start paying attention until it's a Category 3.
1 out of 5 Floridians is like Maurice. They've been forced to cut back or go without insurance.
1 out of 5, that's 20% of homeowners. That's a lot.
That option allows me to manage my own risk.
Okay, let's back up and talk about how insurance actually works. Insurance companies determine premiums for you based on risk assessment. Generally speaking, the higher the risk, the higher your premium goes. They assess risk factors like the quality of building materials in your house, your neighborhood, what kind of dog breed you own, and of course, natural disasters.
So, if you have a wildfire risk in California and a hurricane risk in Florida, those two things are supposed to balance themselves out.
But as the planet warms and natural disasters increase, the insurance business model hasn't been keeping up.
And what's happening is that the risks of some of those perils, of climate-driven perils in particular, are increasing so much that the insurance companies are having a difficult time making the profit that they've always expected that they will make.
In response,
now, for all those people who are like, oh my God, climate change isn't real. Well, you're feeling it in your pocket. And why? It's because they see the real world results of it on your home. So fighting climate change is actually fiscally responsible for you. Are you paying attention now? So when you have people, especially candidates that are running, especially outside the two-party system, that talk about fighting climate change, and I'm not talking about the fighting climate change that the Democrats talk about, because that's BS, right? Because they're going to still keep on using exploitation in order to do green industry jobs and things like that, which in reality, they're still going to be exploiting people. No, I'm talking about the real people who are for fighting climate change. That's what I'm talking about. We have candidates like that, then you realize, well, they're actually trying to fight so that my money doesn't get funny when it comes to protecting my home. But a minute says Cat 1 in Orlando is rain. Yep, basically. Let's continue.
Major national carriers are raising rates and cutting policies. Today, 12% of people in the United States don't have homeowners insurance. Up the coast in Fort Myers, Florida, is Priscilla O'Hara.
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
She stayed in her home during Hurricane Ian, just like Maurice.
My son and I stood at the front door looking out the glass window and watched the rivers right over there, watched the water coming up, and here it's coming, nothing we could do. Here it's coming. And then the wind changed in about 10 feet from the house, and back out it went.
Her roof was damaged, but when she filed the claim, her insurer State Farm told her that her policy didn't cover wind.
I don't think we really realized that we were not covered for wind damage. Did not.
Hang on. You mean to tell me in the state of Florida that you do not have coverage for wind damage, that they don't give you wind damage coverage automatically? Y'all see why I don't like private insurance? Y'all see why? Burn capitalism with fire, people. Please. 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 goodness gracious.
Know that. I mean, hurricanes are wind.
The next year, State Farm dropped her. They said her house, which was built in 1976, was too old to insure.
I've been with them for 40 years, probably. It was a total shock. Yeah. Oh, okay.
They dropped her because they said that the house was too old. These people going to hell.
This goes back. Well, he paid this in September of 2022, $881. So, I mean, they had our premiums all those years went in their bank account.
State Farm ended that year with a net worth of $131 billion.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Yeah, they're not good and they are not neighborly in the least at all, not in the slightest. And the thing is, you got to think about all those premiums that were paid month after month for years and years and years, all for them to say, "No, we're not going to pay for you." They squeezed that woman dry for all that she's worth. If you, let's say hypothetically, you're paying $500 a month for a year, right? Your premiums are $500 per month. That's $6,000 you paid for the entire year, right? Now, let's do that over 10 years. And let's say you don't have any big weather events that you need to get a premium on or pay for at all within a decade. That's not out of the realm of possibility here in Florida, right? Because hurricanes can come, but it may not be that bad and you may not have any wind damage, so you don't need to make a claim, right? So over 10 years, $6,000 a year, that's $60,000 you paid to insurance over a 10-year period, right? And let's say the 11th year, you may have some wind damage, so you probably are going to have to pay, let's say, $4,000, $5,000, right? So you pay $4,000 or $5,000 for the damage to your roof, and you put out the deductible, and let's say they approve it. Meanwhile, that $55,000 that they have gotten out of you is in their pockets. You do not get that back at all. Or let's say that they say no and they don't approve you for that. That's $60,000 that they made off of you for 10 years. That they made off of you. And then they run away and they got all that money from you. Now, times that by 10, 20, 30, 40,000 different customers. They got the country by the throat. They got all y'all by the throat. If you're a homeowner, yeah. That's the private insurance company for homeowners insurance.
The roof damage cost her over $6,000, which she paid out of pocket.
Okay, you can tell a little bit. There's a little different shade. It cost us $6,292, $6,292 to have it replaced.
Priscilla shopped around, but she couldn't find an insurer that she trusted.
I want a company that I know something about, not some company I've never heard of before.
That seems smart.
Yeah. If we had that roof damage, I could do it again, I guess. Don't want to, but I guess I could.
So what exactly happens to someone if they don't have insurance?
If you don't have insurance for your home, you might lose your mortgage or you might face higher mortgage rates. And worse, if you have a disaster and your home is uninsured, then you lose the value of that home or you face that out-of-pocket cost to repair that house, which could be hundreds of thousands of dollars or more. So it can be absolutely bankrupting.
Priscilla and Maurice have both paid off their homes. But if you have a mortgage, you have to have homeowners insurance. So for people who can't find insurance, Florida has something unique, a a state-run, not-for-profit backstop that is actually the #1 insurer in the state.
Citizens Property Insurance.
Citizens Property Insurance, a state-run insurer called Citizens Insurance.
Did you know that this existed? A state-run and owned home insurance company. Did you know that exists in Florida? If you're not a homeowner, then you didn't know. I didn't know. I'm not a homeowner. A lot of us aren't homeowners. So we don't know about things like this, but it actually does exist. This is a homeowners insurance public option that exists in the state. So let's continue.
Citizens Property Insurance was established in 2002, 10 years after Hurricane Andrew hit Miami.
It's absolutely for sure, no question about it. It is going to happen tonight.
Hurricane Andrew was, at the time, the costliest hurricane in Florida's history, and it hit the insurance industry hard.
And the state was facing the prospects of incredibly precipitous economic decline, and they wanted to avoid that.
In 1992, Miami was a city of almost 2 million people. Lawmakers didn't want to see the city decline. So in 1993, they held an emergency legislative session and created what would later become Citizens Insurance.
And it was wildly successful. It did provide insurance to people who couldn't buy it on the commercial market. But more importantly, it reversed the flow of people leaving the state. It canceled the possibility of that exodus, and it led to enormous growth.
Citizens was supposed to be the insurer of last resort, but then the state was hit with a record hurricane season in 2004 and again in 2005. As more parts of Florida became uninsurable, Citizens expanded to protect more homeowners. Now, 1.2 million Florida residents have public instead of private insurance. This backstop is important.
If you start to lose insurance in a community, then the home values will drop as a result of that. And as those home values drop, you'll see people start to move away from that community and the tax base decreases. And as the tax base decreases, you have less money for schools, you have less money for infrastructure and fixing potholes in roads and so on. And you start to see this sort of spiral of decline, this negative momentum.
A study from the
So it is a domino effect, right? This is why one of the reasons why I say that, education should not be tied to property taxes, because that's one of the things that actually really just stifles the community, as having it tied to property taxes. To be honest with you, it all should be federal funded, just like Department of Defense schools, but that's another conversation. But the thing is like, let's go back to this, because this is something that a lot of people do not regard as much. So it says tax base decreases, less money for schools, less money for infrastructure. So for instance, once the infrastructure degrades, once the education degrades, then guess what? That's when you get what you call the hood. And so then the education rates go down, the buildings become more dilapidated, the school, the infrastructure becomes more dilapidated. Then people start to leave, really. And then the small businesses start to suffer because there's not as many people buying within that community. So then people become more lower income. All because insurance companies do not want to insure the area because it's too high risk. Then the crime goes up. And once the crime starts to go up because people are more in poverty, then guess what? Then it's even more risky for insurers to insure that home in that area. Or they will increase their premiums so that they can be insured. And so then it's a snowball effect. And so when you do have a public provided homeowners insurance, well, then it's not based on profit. it's not based on profit, then guess what? They're not really going to be looking at risk assessment as much, because they're not going to try to be making money off of it. It's just to make sure that your home is insured. Really, instead of it being incentivized by profit, it's incentivized for people to keep their homes. Oh, isn't that interesting? So let's continue, because if you have that in there, if you still continue to keep people insured, then that means that they don't leave. Now we can talk about later about how we should just be funding schools, across the board equally without having it to be burden on, property taxes. We can talk about that, but it would keep the money for schools in place. It would keep the money for the infrastructure to keep in place. And then more people will stay, which means that more small businesses will be able to stay, which means that more people will be able to make more money, meaning that the community would be more stabilized. But I digress.
Decline this negative momentum.
A study from the Environmental Defense Fund calculated where the most money could be lost in tax revenue due just to increased risks of flooding. Homes in coastal Florida, they determined, could be overvalued by as much as $10 billion a year. And if this whole video you're thinking, well, luckily I don't live in Florida, here's the national map. But the public model has a major flaw.
It's put more people in the path of risk, so it's increased their economic vulnerability. But it's also affected the way Americans vote. It's affected climate policy on a state level and on a federal level, because constituents are not expressing urgency to enact policy to address climate change, to lower those risks, because they don't feel those risks.
None of this has stopped people from moving to the coasts. In 2023, a year after Hurricane Ian's devastation, Lee County's population still grew. But the people who have been able to rebuild and afford their homes has changed. Fort Myers Beach is a coastal island just west of Fort Myers. It's been a popular resort town and home for retirees since the 1950s. Ian was the costliest hurricane to ever hit Florida. The Category 4 storm did $112 billion in damage, and Fort Myers Beach was one of the hardest hit. A third of the homes on the island were destroyed. But the town is rebuilding. Everywhere you look, there are cranes and scaffolding and large RVs where former residents are staying. We met with Lori Curry, a real estate agent who has sold property on the island since 2004.
I think when you drive here, you see the obvious changes from its original days when it was mainly a retirement community and a little less affordable for some of the original owners.
Lori says a lot of the smaller retiree homes that were built in the 50s and 60s were damaged, and they're being replaced by rentals bought by wealthy investors.
The people that came and bought at a discounted price, they knew what they were doing.
Many former residents struggle to rebuild. A report from Bloomberg said the building on Fort Myers Beach, especially with the new federal and state building codes, can easily start at $1 million. 8 out of 10 homes sold the first year after Ian were purchased with cash. It turned out that Lori and her husband had their own fight with their insurance company.
So let's go here. So this also explains a lot of all these homes that are being bought up by corporations, like BlackRock, for instance. They're buying up all these homes and then renting them out for money, is because the value of these homes been depreciated because people can't afford their insurance. So the homes depreciate in value. So the homes aren't valued that much. So these corporations buy up the homes for pennies on a dollar, essentially, and then they're able to rent them out and make all this money. And now you're turning it into a nation of renters. So, yeah. Let's continue.
Company after Hurricane Ian.
They canceled us.
Yeah.
Yeah, they canceled. Yeah, they said they weren't going to, and then they did.
They'd had roof damage, and initially their insurer Edison wouldn't cover it. They ended up taking the company to court.
They fought us tooth and nail the whole way. So that's the mentality of the insurance companies. You know, they like to take your money, but they don't like to pay it off when there's a risk involved.
Lori and Ron say they were lucky. Because they had an attorney, they were able to get a new roof, and the cost of the attorney and public assessor was covered by Edison.
And that's the problem, is some people are very reluctant and reticent, and they're still suffering.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of foreclosures. They're walking away.
So Fort Myers Beach is an extreme example, but Florida is in the middle of a housing crisis, and rising prices are impacting renters and first-time homebuyers the most.
We have been in an affordable housing crisis for years in Florida. The insurance crisis is making it far worse.
You might think the role of the public option, citizens, would be to keep these costs down, but there's a problem with that. Since the creation of Citizens Property Insurance, the insurance lobby has pushed to keep rates high.
The emphasis should always be to try to get those people into the market where they're paying the full rate and not counting on their neighbors to pay part of the tab for them.
The state initially required that Citizens be non-competitive, even as insurance companies kept raising rates more and more.
The insurance industry used to love Citizens, right? They love the idea of a last resort insurer where they can just sort of like leave the dregs, the most risky and unprofitable claims, off on the public while doing the rest of the stuff themselves.
Now, think about the public option that the Democrats were pushing for, Medicare, like what Pete Buttigieg was saying, Medicare for all who want it, right? So this is basically the homeowners version of that, where you have two tiers of people. You have the people who can't afford the private insurance that get the better Cadillac insurance, right? The good Cadillac insurance. And then you pass off and put off the people that you don't want, the undesirables, onto the public option. So this is basically the same thing when it comes to homeowners insurance. And that's what the insurance companies like, because the thing is, like, the ones that are with higher risk, meaning that you would actually have to pay out insurance claims, and they don't want to do that. So, if you have a house that's fairly new that has, everything up to code and everything up to date, what that means that they're going to be less likely to have to pay out any type of claims on it. Meaning you can just keep collecting premiums and premiums and premiums all the live long day. So then you're making as much money as you possibly can because you don't have to pay anything on it. Same thing goes for things like healthcare insurance, right? The private insurance, this is why they like to insure people who are young, fit, and healthy, because then that means that they can keep collecting somebody who's 21 years old, who doesn't smoke, who works out quite regularly. Well, that's banking. That's bank, because then they can keep collecting the premiums each month off of that person. And so then when push comes to shove, they're making all that money. Versus somebody like me that's 40 years old, that's on kidney dialysis. Well, they don't want to touch me with a 10-foot pole, because that means that, this person's going to be in a hospital more regularly. And if they're in a hospital more regularly, that means we're going to have to put out and pay more for this person's care. So then they don't want to have me under their insurance. That's why they're so happy that I'm on Medicare. Or they would do that for people who are on a public option for Medicare for all who want it, right? So then they can still keep making their millions of dollars, but they can pass off the poor people onto the public option, whether it's for healthcare or for, essentially house insurance.
2007, after those record hurricane years, the state changed the rules. Citizens didn't have to be more expensive than private carriers.
Right now, these private companies are taking on all the safe risks where they are assured a profit and passing all the bad risk onto the state via Citizens Property Insurance Company.
So the bad risk being that they are now having to pay out the premiums. I'm sorry, not to pay out the premium, pay out the insurance claims. And it's on the back of essentially the back of the taxpayers, right? And so they don't want it all to be placed on them. So this would essentially be the same thing with a public option when it comes to if you had a healthcare public option, right? You would have all the bad risk placed on the federal government, or if you did it through the state, you own the state government, and more money will be pumped out through the state via taxpayers onto the people, on our backs, to pay, versus all the more or less risk people would be in the private sector, but they would be paying out less, right? And they'd be making all this profit. So essentially.
Insurance industry hated that.
If you're in South Florida and you can get citizens coverage at 30 to 40% less than the private market, you're going to do that.
In 2022, Ron DeSantis caved to the insurance lobby.
And we have to create an environment where people want to come in and compete for your business. You can't dump everybody on Citizens property insurance.
The Florida legislature passed a series of bills that would overhaul insurance law. And Ron DeSantis started depopulating Citizens insurance. The goal was to kick people off of the insurer of last resort and get them back into the private market. But with
So now it is kind of reversed. It's like, nah, we want them. Basically saying, no, we will actually now want some of these people to be on because we want them to pay all this money. It's crazy. Because now everybody's going, well, I can actually save money because Citizens is actually cheaper and I'm not going to be paying as much. So I might as well just go to Citizens anyway. Even though I may still be kind of low risk, I still want to go with Citizens anyway. You know what I'm saying? But now the private insurance is like, oh, no. Now we don't want Citizens. Now we want you all to be on private insurance. And I want you to think about not just with homeowners insurance, but also with a public option. This is why I do not favor a public option. Because a lot of times, if you still have these corporate private insurance in place, they're going to either say, oh, well, we can dump all these people on, or if more healthy people start to go with the public option instead, because it is an option, it's going to be more affordable for them, then they're going to get mad and they're going to want to gut it anyway, right? Which is essentially happening with Medicare right now. They're trying to privatize Medicare because they don't not want people to have Medicare. They want that money to be going to them because capitalists, they essentially see what's going on with these private insurance, the public insurance, and they're like, well, that's money that they're also getting that we should be having, so that they want that too.
So many major insurers denying coverage. Customers are stuck with companies that are a lot more risky.
Yeah, particularly in the last 10 to 15 years, large national insurers, the kind that you would recognize from commercials,
We are farmers, bum, 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 bum,
have pulled way back for the most part.
And in their place are companies called domestics.
These are smaller in-state companies that tend to have far fewer resources. They aren't nearly as well capitalized. They're heavily reliant on reinsurance, which is insurance they buy for themselves.
DeSantis is trying to get new companies into the state, but he isn't being very discerning. Enter Slide Insurance, a startup founded by one of the lawyers for Enron. Yes, that Enron.
I knew that there were going to be mass insolvencies in Florida. So we raised a tremendous amount of capital to really kind of capitalize on market opportunities and provide new solutions to the homeowners.
The CEO of Slide Insurance, Bruce Lucas, was thrilled about DeSantis' changes to insurance laws. The new bills made it harder for customers to sue insurers over unpaid claims and created a bigger fund of reinsurance to protect insurers. That's the insurance for insurers. And most important, it handed Slide Insurance more customers. The Washington Post reported that businesses like Slide can cherry pick the policies they want, choose the properties that have the lowest amount of risk, and reject the ones in flood or hurricane-prone areas. Lucas laid it all out on a podcast called The Insurance Guys.
You get to cherry pick policies.
Correct.
You are underwriting and cherry picking the best policies, leaving kind of the worst ones there.
Sometimes policyholders don't even know they're being pushed off of their plans. As long as the new policy is less than 20% more than Citizens premium, they can be forced off of their policy.
You send out these notices and it gets mixed in with everybody's junk mail. In the trash can it goes. Next thing you know, you've got 200,000 customers.
That's crazy. You're getting put onto somebody else's plan all because you may have not neglected. And it's like, well, you have to opt out. No. And then you get put on this horrible policy. I'm going to say this. I was going to say this at the end, but I'm saying it now. We need a single payer homeowners insurance in this country. Single payer. I am sick and tired of seeing these private insurance companies. We need single payer homeowners insurance and housing for all. Dear God. God, these goons.
Last year, Slide was approved to take over 250,000 policies from Citizens.
The bad news, it's about 4.3 times what I was quoted for Citizens.
The premium for the same level of coverage from Slide was $14,684.
Look at that. The Citizens is the public, it's the state-run property insurance corporation. Slide is a private company. Look at the renewal premium difference. That's ridiculous. You're paying almost 4 times that price.
They've also swooped in to buy out policies from insurers that have gone bankrupt or left the state, like United Property and Casualty and Farmers Insurance.
This year, they provided a different option for me if I wanted to switch called Slide Insurance. That sounds shady.
So just how risky is Slide Insurance? They aren't a publicly traded company, so it's hard to know all their finances. In interviews, Lucas touts the fact that Demotech gives them an A rating, but the more reliable Weiss ratings gives them a D+, pointing out that they have low liquidity and capitalization. Reporter Jason Garcia thinks Citizens should be expanded.
A public nonprofit insurer does not have to earn a profit. That allows it to charge insurance that is more affordable.
And 2 Florida representatives agree. Republican Spencer Roach, who survived Hurricane Ian himself, and Democrat Hillary Cassell, a former litigator for insurers, both think Citizens should be available to all homeowners in the state.
Think of this as the National Flood Insurance Program, but instead of at the federal level, it's at the state level. Florida, at some point in the future, is going to embrace the idea of universal wind coverage.
But they're up against a powerful political force that doesn't want to see Citizens expand. Since 2019, when DeSantis was sworn in, the insurance industry has donated nearly $10 million to DeSantis and the Republican Party.
Boom, there it is. This is why people like Ron DeSantis are not good for homeowners. Because he wants to partner with the private insurance companies, with the corporate parasites that want to have you buy the balls. That's who Ron DeSantis is. And yet, some of you guys want to keep him in office? It's not working out for most homeowners. And then guess what? It's going to, and if it doesn't affect you directly, it will affect people around you, and then it will affect you directly. This is why people like Ron DeSantis are dangerous for Florida. He's bought. He's bought.
And the bills that DeSantis has passed since have almost all been handouts to the insurance industry.
The entire overarching strategy that Governor Ron DeSantis and the current Florida legislature have is to help private insurance companies make money in the hopes that benefits will trickle down to consumers.
Okay, so what does this all mean for the average homeowner or renter? Florida can prove as a model for what not to do. States should provide affordable not-for-profit plans for residents that can't rely on private insurance.
It's a risk, but I think it's one well worth taking. Paradise has a price. I'm hoping to live the rest of my golden years down here. I'm not going anywhere.
And while these major insurance companies claim poverty, remember that in 2022, the CEOs of the top 10 insurance companies made a combined total of over $130 million. There's one more layer to this whole story. Climate change is increasing the likelihood of disasters that are driving up risks for insurance companies. But those same companies are literally adding fuel to the fire. Public Citizens and Perot writes that insurance companies, including State Farm and Allstate, have major holdings in fossil fuel companies.
It's a feedback loop. That's what it is. So they're fueling climate change. Climate change actually makes it worse makes it more risky to own homes, and the more higher risk on homes, that means they get to bump up the insurance premiums and they get to bump up the deductibles, meaning that they're making more money. So then they continuously fund the fossil fuel companies that are increasing climate change. So it's a feedback loop. It's a greedy feedback loop that actually helps them out in the end. And who gets stiffed? It's you, it's me, it's our kids and our parents that get stiffed. And a lot of people do not realize this. And this is why I continuously and will start calling for a single payer homeowners insurance in this country. We no longer need these private insurers at all. We need a nationalized healthcare system and a single payer homeowners insurance company in this country. No more private insurers. They need to be cut out of our system, period.
State Farm is also part of ALEC, the group that has lobbied against emission restrictions. And for his part, DeSantis accepted almost $3 million from donors contributing to the climate crisis in 2022. And this year, he signed a bill that weakens environmental protections and bans construction of offshore wind turbines in state waters.
What I've found is people, when they start talking about things like global warming, they typically use that as a pretext to do a bunch of left-wing things that they would want to do anyways.
This year,
hang on. See, here's the problem with people like Ron DeSantis. When you try to do something that's really pro-worker, he'll say, oh, that's just left wing, right? Like, for instance, when I was talking to Todd Schaefer, we were talking about worker co-ops and growing and worker ownership of their workplaces, right? Wouldn't that be nice if workers actually collectively own their workplaces and able to run it democratically so that all the profits go to all the workers, so then it actually builds the workers up? Guess who will call that left wing? Ron DeSantis would say, well, that's just woke left wing. Even though it's a benefit to all workers. Ron DeSantis is saying to you in coded language that he does not give a damn about workers. He does not give a damn about you. He doesn't give a damn about me. The only people he gives a damn about are the people that live in places like Windermere and Isleworth here in Orlando. He gives a damn about the people who live in West Palm Beach. The Epsteins of Florida. That's who he cares about. He doesn't care about you or me. He just wants to lay it up in his governor's mansion in Tallahassee. That's who Ron DeSantis is. Ron DeSantis doesn't care about any of us. I don't care if you're white, black, brown, red, green, blue, polka dot. It doesn't matter. He doesn't care about you because you don't have the money for him to care about you. This is why I say walk away from both Democrat and Republican parties. Because somebody like Ron DeSantis is really a cancer for this state.
The United States has already experienced 19 weather events that cost more than $1 billion in recovery. We have to be honest about the impact of climate change, take efforts to fortify homes and cities, and start the work to transition to energy that doesn't use carbon.
So shout out to More Perfect Union, man. They keep coming out with banger after banger on that one. And so, I highly recommend people to start pushing and talking about a single payer homeowners insurance across the country. We can call it home care for all, right? Because the thing is, like, people should not have to worry about, homeowners should not have to worry about this. Now, as a renter, I honestly think that this could also indirectly help somebody like me. Because if homeowners insurance is not, affecting homeowners in a horrible way, that means, people will actually have more money to go into the economy. That means that they can have more money to spend on small businesses. They can have and then maybe we can start going into property insurance, that's single payer as well. So let's say you got a mom and pop shop. They don't have to pay all this money to insure, their business. So then they can do single payer business insurance. And they're not getting, raked over the coals for that, meaning that they can actually pay their workers more, meaning that they can actually give better benefits to their workers. See where it's going? See where it's going? Because ultimately, it's about the caring of the workers. People like Ron DeSantis doesn't care. People like Joe Biden doesn't care. Kamala Harris doesn't care. I'm sorry, I mispronounced her name. Kamala Harris doesn't care. People like J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, they don't care. This is why I have independents on who are running. This is why I have third-party candidates on that are running. And it won't just be here in Florida. It will be throughout the United States. So please make sure to keep an eye on people who are actually fighting for workers. And also, we need to organize and fight for ourselves. This also means going when it comes to ballot initiatives, citizen ballot initiatives, so that we can actually have direct democracy without actually having to go through politicians too. So yes, homeowners, especially a lot of you guys that are struggling out there, hang on. Help is coming. So go ahead and give the stream a like. Let's go into the chat. Let me check to see if I have any Rumble rants really quick. I don't think I have any Rumble rants, but if I do, that'll be nice. But no, we're good. Okay. All right. So let's go into the Rockfin chat. I'll go in there really quick, and then we shall go into the general chat. So yes, Anna Mayer says America really hates old, poor, and disabled people. Agreed. It's not just home insurance. Car insurance is insane right now. Mine went from $100 to $195 a month on a 7-year-old car in the last year, almost 100% increase without any claims. Yeah, we got to talk about that too. Car insurance is ridiculous. This is why I can't get a car. I don't have a car, and I can't get one because the thing is, like, if I get a car, not only do I have to pay, make sure I have money for maintenance, gas, I also have to make sure I have money for insurance. And the problem is that I can't afford it. This is why I don't have transportation because, people are like, oh, well, all you got to do is pay even if you bought a car cash, how much are you going to have for gas? How much are you going to have for insurance? That's also expenses that you have to think about. Maybe we can talk about, single payer auto insurance too. People are going to be looking at me, oh my God, you're such a communist. Thank you. All right. So, yes, I know about hemp car. I know about arresting Richard Medhurst. I'm actually going to be talking about that a little bit towards the end. But yes, I'll be talking about that too. So, yes. Anna Mayer says, you'll owe nothing, be happy, plus we'll lock you up for thought crimes. It's time to disassociate from this disgusting system. Yes. That's kind of a bonus story I'll be talking about a little bit towards the end. But let's go into the general chat. There's a few things that I saw that I would like to talk about. Roger Meadows says, Jay, this is a job for the public bank to be used for disaster relief, to rebuild damage to homes and build it back better, and consumer cooperative to replace personal items. Okay. This is one of the ideas that I think that should be implemented, is a public bank that also focuses on creating infrastructure so that if in case something happens, like a storm, like a hurricane, then you can actually build it back better so that, homeowners aren't stiffed when it comes to private insurance. Roger also continues, says Florida has no state income tax, and Florida doesn't have a sovereignty currency with no public bank. So how are they finding the money for this public insurance option? Your guess is as good as mine. The thing is, it's like they also don't pay teachers and public workers as good as they should. A lot of these money that they, save is money, that should really be going to us, but instead, no, they don't. But at the same time, yeah, they have the money for a public insurance option. So, I mean, should we have a state income tax? I think we should, but that income tax should be heavily placed on the highest earners. I think, okay, so here's a policy proposal that I think we should have in the state of Florida. I think that a state income tax should be implemented on anyone who makes over $250,000 a year. Well, $200,000 a year. I'll say 200. The reason being is because those who make $200,000 a year, they're good. They're good. The people who live in places like Isleworth and Windermere and in Winter Park, they should be taxed higher. In fact, the tax should start at them. Anybody who's making under $200,000 a year should not pay state income tax at all. At all. And that income should not just be on a paycheck. It should also be on stocks, dividends, bonds, all that. You should pay a tax on it. Now, what the tax should be, I don't know. But I'm thinking north of 30% in the state of Florida. Yeah. So not only should you pay, I think a state income tax should be implemented on anybody who makes above $200,000 a year. Yep. Because if you're making that much in this state and you're not contributing to the state, even though you're getting the benefits from it, then yeah, you're stealing from us. Now, does that make me sound crazy? Well, stop stiffing the workers and start paying the workers and making sure the workers are good. Then maybe you can shift my, well, no, you're not going to shift my opinion. No, because I believe that workers should own the means of production anyway. So, well, if you're rich, screw you. I don't care. The fuck. All right. Roger Meadow says, hey, does anyone see? Yeah, I got those already. He says, having a public insurance to keep people from leaving your state was the exact same argument I was making for the New York Health Act. They dropped the ball and result in mass exodus to Florida, making them expensive. Yep. And this is why Orlando is exploding right now with New Yorkers. Now, I don't have a problem with New Yorkers. I love y'all. I'm from Jersey. But the problem is that now that we have this explosion, guess what? Prices are also going up. We're becoming more congested in this state. Roger says, JB, this was the bill he signed into law or executive order. If the law, then Floridians should run an initiative giving them the power to enact veto referendums to repeal laws, then repeal this law. I don't know. I would have to look into that, but thank you very much. Yes, Tim Price says he is a paid mouthpiece and says, wouldn't it be wild if the cost of homeowners insurance rising was a plan to get regular families to be forced to sell their houses to capital? Oh, Tim, you just gave the game away. Roger says third parties are the compromise. Independent is the goal. Unions are the compromise. Worker cooperatives are the gold. I like the way you said that. Yes, they do want a nation of renters. Dwayne says Portland, Maine is also exploding with New Yorkers. Yep, absolutely. All right, let's get to the shout outs on Patreon and we'll get to the last segment. I know I am very, very long running, but I also had some important things to talk about. So let's get to the shout out on to the patrons. Yes, the patrons. All right, so let me share my screen and show you the tiers. These are the tiers. So shout out to patrons on Patreon for all that you do to keep the lights on. Thank you so very much. We have the tiers here: Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrades, Solidarity, JB members. All right, and a big shout out to all new members. We have the new member Gizmo. Thank you so very much. We had other new members that I think live on Sunday, so thank you very much. We also have Gizmo. Thank you so very much for being a part of the JB fam. All right, so let's get into the final segment we're going to be talking about, and then I'll do the bonus story really quick. So we're going to be talking about Amendment 3, Florida 2024. Baby, let's talk about it. Oh my goodness. It is a great ballot initiative we're going to be talking about. Oh my goodness. Everybody's talking about this one. This one is a popular one. Amendment 3. Oh boy. All right. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's take a look. So what is Florida Amendment 3? Well, let's take a look. Let's read it. Florida Amendment 3, Marijuana Legalization Initiative. So we're talking about the Florida Amendment 3 for 2024. So here is the language. It says, Florida Amendment 3, the Marijuana Legalization Initiative is on the ballot in Florida as an initiated constitutional amendment on November 5th, 2024. A yes vote supports legalizing marijuana for adults 21 years old and older and allowing individuals to possess up to 3 ounces of marijuana. A no vote opposes legalizing marijuana for adult use in Florida. So it requires a supermajority, which is 60% majority. Supermajority vote is required for the approval of the amendment. So here's the overview. It says the initiative would legalize recreational marijuana for adults 20 years old and older. Individuals will also be allowed to possess up to 3 ounces of marijuana with up to 5 grams in the form of concentrate. Existing medical marijuana treatment centers would be authorized under the initiative to sell marijuana to adults for personal use. The Florida state legislature could provide by state law for the licensure of entities other than existing medical marijuana treatment centers to cultivate and sell marijuana products. Medical marijuana was adopted by Florida voters in 2016 by a vote of 71% to 29%. So, I'll read this towards the end. So, it says, what is the status of recreational marijuana in the United States? As of November 8th of last year, 24 states and Washington, D.C. had legalized possession and personal use of marijuana for recreational purposes. In 13 states and D.C., the ballot initiative process was used to legalize marijuana. In 2 states, the legislature referred a measure to the ballot for voter approval. In 9 states, bills to legalize marijuana were enacted into law. Florida is one of 10 states that has the initiative process and has not yet legalized marijuana. The other states are Arkansas, Idaho, Oklahoma, Utah, Wyoming, Mississippi, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Oklahoma voters rejected the initiative to legalize marijuana in March 7th of last year. Initiatives were rejected by voters in Arkansas, North Dakota, and South Dakota in 2022. So you have to have a 60% margin, right? Supermajority. So it says this requirement was added to the state constitution in approval of Amendment 3 in 2006. So it says, since then, 9 constitutional amendments, including Amendment 2 of 2014, designated to legalize marijuana, have received a majority of votes in favor, but failed to reach 60% threshold were therefore defeated. So we have been trying to legalize it multiple times. all in the last 18 years. And we have gotten a majority, but it hasn't reached a super majority yet. So we're always right there when it comes to legalizing it, but we just need that one little bit of oomph in order to get it. And so could 2024 be that year? Well, it could be. Thing is, it's like we'll always reach that one little bit, but we always just shy. So says the average yes vote was 57.86%, and the no vote was 42.21%, but an average margin of victory of 15.65%. So that's across the country. So the initiative's potential. Here is Florida Democratic Party Chairwoman Nikki Fried says having the ballot measure fundamentally shifts the demographics of who is targeted for turnout and who doesn't. This is going to be a tactic we're going to run on the issues that the voters care about. So they're basically talking about the turnout. The turnout is going to be most likely higher for presidential elections. So let's go to the ballot summary. So the ballot summary says it allows adults 21 years of age or older to possess, purchase, or use marijuana products and marijuana accessories for non-medical personal consumption by smoking, ingestion, or otherwise. Allows the medical marijuana treatment centers and other state licensed entities to acquire, cultivate, process, manufacture, sell, and distribute such products and accessories. Applies to Florida law, does not change or immunize violations of federal law. Establishes possession limits to personal use, allows consistent legislation, defines terms, provides effective date. So, adult personal use says the amendment's financial impact primarily comes from expected tax collections. As if legal today, sales of non-medical marijuana would be subject to sales tax and would remain so if voters approve this amendment. Based on other states' experiences, expected retail sales of non-medical marijuana would generate at least $195.6 million annually in state and local tax revenues once the retail market is fully operational, although the timing of this occurring is unclear. So, here's the thing. It would also be a huge boom of tax revenue for this state. So let's go to who supports it. So the officials of State Senator John Gruters, corporations is Trulieve. They're a medical marijuana company. Individuals that support it are Howard Bellamy, who is an artist, David Bellamy, who is also an artist, and then John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan, for the people, Florida lawyer. So if anybody knows, throughout the country, John Morgan is big on marijuana legalization here in Florida. He pushes for it heavily. So with that being said, here are the arguments. So Smart and Safe Florida says the industry is sustainable and growing. In 2020, when the state lost more than 400,000 jobs, Florida cannabis industry added 15,000 employees. Now, I want to say this. As far as during the pandemic, a lot of people were home. A lot of people were secluded. And a lot of people were getting into the sauce while they were, some of us in some of our counties were under lockdown. For Orange County here, we actually went under lockdown. So for people who were dealing with, the isolation a little bit, well, they were consuming a little bit more gas. So, of course, some people got the medical marijuana as well in order to help themselves, right? People dealing with depression, anxiety, and things like that. So, of course, the sale of it went up. And this is with the official numbers for medical. We're not talking about how much the plugs made. The plugs were banking. They were making some dough. They were making cheddar. They were making some cheese because of the pandemic. Hell, they were delivering like they were DoorDash. They were delivering like they were Uber Eats. You know what I'm saying? And so let's just say, hypothetically, if this were to pass, the plugs will be able to actually become a legitimate business and they'd be able to rake in more money because the stigma is gone. Right? Just saying. All right, let's continue. It says tax revenues from the legal cannabis industry for federal and state governments are projected to reach $4.06 billion in 2025, according to New Frontier data. There's no evidence that legalizing marijuana for medical or recreational use at the state level, as 37 states already have done, has boosted underage consumption from the regulated marketplace. The continued black market sale of marijuana perpetuates a culture of criminality. If adult use cannabis is legalized, Florida users will have accountability, transparency, and regulations in place to ensure products are not laced with or contain potentially deadly chemicals. This is another thing. If it is illegal, then guess what? You'll have people who will lace it in order to stretch it out so that they can make more money, essentially, right? But when they use that to stretch it out, then guess what? You're going to be getting potentially harmful things in it, which can harm the people who consume it. You're never going to stop the consumption. Never, ever, ever, ever. But you can make the consumption more safe. But it requires legalization. And with that legalization means that people are going to have to be regulated. These companies will have to be regulated. The plugs will have to be regulated. And the quality of it. And if the quality of it is for safe for consumption, then less people will get sick. See? I think we have I think in the law, we have a particular strain that's legal. I think it's Delta 8 or 9. But there's actually strains that are legal here already. You might as well legalize it all. But that's the thing. You want to make sure consumption is safe. Kim Rivers from Truly says it's all about improving access. We came into this mission with providing access to high quality products that are safe and have an appropriate value proposition to give folks the control over an original day's medical journey. I don't think that changes here. In effect, we are at our core about expanding opportunity for access to the safe legal product, which is what this would allow us to continue to do. The Bellamy brothers, they say they see the benefits of adult use in Florida, as we love the Freedom State moniker and believe Florida needs to join the millions of Americans whose adults are free to use cannabis without fear of being incarcerated. Yes. John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan says, I'm putting my name and my heart into passing Amendment 3. I believe now is the time to treat marijuana as the same as we treat beer, wine, and spirits. Passing Amendment 3 will create tens of thousands of new jobs, generate hundreds of millions for our state each year, and save taxpayers money by not having to pay to prosecute simple crimes for possession. He says, I encourage Florida voters to join me in standing up for freedom, for common sense laws, and for the people, and for Amendment 3. Of course, John Morgan says he's for the people. John Gruder says supporting Amendment 3 is a common sense decision that prioritizes the individual freedom, health, and safety of economic growth by legalizing recreational marijuana for adults. We can give Floridians access to safe products, generate significant revenue for critical public services, and create new job opportunities for Floridians. Now, that is the people who are for Amendment 3 that want to vote yes. Here's the opposition. So here are the opponents. Senator Rick Scott, Representative Matt Gaetz, Representative Governor Ron DeSantis and Attorney General Ashley Moody. Now, here's the funny part. Marco Rubio is not on that list. I repeat, Marco Rubio is not on that list. Interesting, right? Remember when we talked about insurance companies? Who makes a lot of money off of insurance companies? Well, people like Rick Scott, people like Ron DeSantis, right? And so they make money off the insurance premiums. Well, no doubt they also make money off of Big Pharma. So, of course, they will be against the legalization of cannabis, because if that was the case, then a lot of people who depend on certain medications in order to be able to keep themselves regulated or to treat certain ailments, they'd be able to get it freely, which would be a whole lot cheaper instead of actually getting medications, which means that the big pharma companies will actually make less, and they don't want that. So, of course, they're going to get money to people like Ron DeSantis and Rick Scott, right? So, of course, they would be against legalizing this. The Republican Party is against this as well. Corporations are My Florida Green, and organizations like a Drug Free America Foundation, Florida Chamber of Commerce, and Simple Approaches to Marijuana are also against this. Here's the arguments from Matt Gaetz. Says, regardless of how someone feels about abortion and marijuana, I don't believe that those issues should be resolved in the state constitution. Hang on. Whatever happened to let's leave it up to the states? I thought that's what we're doing. Hold up. So it's leave it up into the states until it's leaving it up into the states. Matt, you're contradicting yourself. Does Eyebrows know exactly what he wants? Goodness gracious. So, Nick Roulette, of medical marijuana dispensary, My Florida Green says the medical patient doesn't belong in the same arena as the recreational. Although recreational will use it for medical purposes, but it does get a little convoluted and confusing. And that's the whole reason we want to keep it as separate as possible. Oh my gosh. She said, it is not fair for a recreational bill or movement to step on the heads of people who are sick, who are debilitated, who are funding these dispensaries. These dispensaries are taking that money to foot the bill to create a recreational movement to create a profit. I thought you guys were for these companies making profits. First of all. Second of all, if it is cheaper for somebody, instead of getting it through a medical marijuana dispensary, to just get it from somebody, that can give it to you cheaper, the same thing, then isn't that more fiscally responsible for citizens? Isn't that better for them so they're not spending as much money? I thought you guys were for people saving money in this state. I mean, if you're spending less money giving it to a plug than you are giving it to a dispensary, then why not? Why are you limiting the options of voters? See, this is what happens when you have politicians that are in the hands of corporations. See, when it actually comes time for you to actually be able to really save money and actually have real options, they don't care. Henry Whitaker, Solicitor General, says this carefully curated ballot summary misleads in ways that, though sometimes subtle, are likely to influence voters to do so in a way that entrenches the sponsor's monopolistic stranglehold on the marijuana market to the detriment of Floridians. The initiative should be stricken. What in the hell were you just saying? What? What does that mean, Whitaker? What in the world did he just say? Are likely to influence vote. That's the point of a ballot. Entrenches the sponsors' monopolistic stranglehold on the marijuana market to the detriment of Floridians. Well, then look, if you don't want to make it monopolistic, then guess what? Put in policies that create antitrust laws so that it doesn't end up being a monopoly. Make sure that everything stays fair. Here's an idea. If you don't want it to be monopolistic, then why not endorse it, but then pass legislation to make sure that everybody that is in prison or in jail for simple possession of cannabis, that not only did they get their records expunged, but also give them a grant to go to business school so that they can go to business school, and then give them seed money so they can start their business so it can get spread around so you can have more entrepreneurs in the state. How about that? But you don't want to do that, do you? Because you don't want the Negroes to get jobs. You don't want the Negroes to own their own businesses, do you? Because that's who primarily was affected for marijuana possession in the state of Florida. Ooh, I got some ideas, but y'all don't want to listen. Short King, Governor Ron DeSantis, well, more like short court gesture, he said these initiatives are very, very extreme. Are they? How many states have legalized it? He says once voters figure out how radical both of those are, they're going to fail. It's basically a license to have it anywhere you want. So no time, place, and manner restrictions. The state will start to smell like marijuana in our cities and towns. Are you kidding me right now? His objection to it is the smell? How many people got alcohol in their house? Are you calling for the banning of alcohol throughout the state? Even though alcohol is actually more dangerous? Are we saying that the state smells like alcohol? You know, one of the benefits of being in independent media is that I also flex my muscles, you know, when it comes to the First Amendment. And I will have to say this. Ron DeSantis is an idiot. Ron DeSantis is a fool, and he thinks you're a fool by saying, oh, well, the entire state's going to smell like marijuana. He thinks you're stupid. You're not. Vote no on 3. Spokeswoman says Amendment 3 will have a disastrous downstream consequence that will turn our state into an East Coast version of California. It will threaten the health and safety of every community in Florida by allowing drug dealers to run rampant with zero consequences. I'm sorry, Miss Sarah Bascom, you're talking about drug dealers running rampant in Florida? You mean like the Sackler family? The ones who owned OxyContin that ran roughshod and caused the opioid crisis? You mean those type of drug dealers that you no doubt get money from when it comes to big pharma? Is that what you're talking about? Those are the drug dealers that I actually want to go after. I want to go after the drug dealers like Eli Lilly. I want to go after the ones like Gilead, GlaxoSmithKline. I want to go after Pfizer. I want to go after Johnson & Johnson. Those are the drug dealers that I want to bring to heel. What about you? Oh my goodness. And then the piece de resistance. Fire Marshal Bill himself, Rick Scott, says, I know that marijuana is a gateway drug. First of all, you know what? Let's finish it because I got some things to say. Says, my brother just died in the last few months, starting with marijuana. He ended up struggling with alcohol and drugs, so I don't support it. Rick, I got to tell you something. You think it's a gateway drug, but the real gateway drug is actually trauma. What did your brother go through in order for him to start experimenting with a mind-altering substance, which everybody does? Hell, caffeine is a mind-altering substance. Alcohol is a mind-altering substance. So with that being the case, people like your brother who passed away, who was abusing it, well, why was he self-medicating? Was it because of the marijuana, or was it actually because of trauma that he has endured in his life? Because you only self-medicate when something feels wrong. So this is Rick Scott pushing the old, oh, it's a gateway drug myth. It's not a myth. It is a falsehood. It's more than a myth. But somebody like Rick Scott wants you to believe that it's not. This is the same guy that made millions upon millions of dollars off of the backs of sick people in Florida with Medicare fraud and all that, allegedly. So, how would I be voting? I will be voting yes on Amendment 3. So, I encourage people to vote yes on Amendment 3 because that really is we're exercising our fundamental right as, basically your body, your choice, right? If you do not agree with the consumption of marijuana, don't consume it. Just like if you don't agree with the consumption of alcohol, don't consume it. Easy as that. The availability of you being able to consume it does not mean that you are necessarily for it. You're just okay with people having the freedom to do it, just even though you don't do it. Like, for instance, Sabby, she doesn't consume cannabis, but she agrees with it being legalized because it's about freedom of choice and it does not harm people. So therefore, it's just like, for instance, I don't like pineapple on pizza, right? Go ahead, come after me in the chat. I know. I don't like pineapple on pizza, but I am okay with people having the right to put pineapple on their pizza because that's their choice. I just won't have pineapple on my pizza. I know. But the state's gonna smell like it. Vote yes on 3. All right, go ahead and give the stream a like. Thank you so very much to everybody for that. Man, that was a fun one. All right, so checking the Rumble for any Rumble rants. We are golden. All righty. All right, so let's go to the rest of the chat and then we'll head on out. It's gonna be a long day for me. Let me see. Roger Meadow says, just so that you know, running a CBI requires 66% voter ratification is needed to repeal or change anything dealing with state income taxes. Thank you very much. Nihilo says, I really appreciate just being able to walk to the shop to buy some here in Canada. And I really hate that my money is going to capitalists. Yep. I mean, if you could just go to the store and buy it, you don't have to sneak. You know what I'm saying? And trust me, I know people who consume it, right? I know people who consume cannabis, right? And the issue is that they shouldn't have to, do it under the cover of darkness. You know what I mean? And plus, why are you having to be sneaky about buying something that's safer than alcohol? And yet, I can go to a Publix, I can go to a Total Wine, I can go to a 7-Eleven, I can go to a Wawa, and all I need is my ID. Hell, I got gray hair on my face. I don't even need my ID no more. They don't even have to card me. Unless I shave there completely. But they wouldn't even have to card me to get my alcohol. And yet you mean to tell me that for something that's safer than alcohol, I have to go over the cover of darkness, right? And sneak just to get something that's safer than that? What? And I'm over the age of 21? I was 21 19 years ago. It's crazy. Ridiculous. Dwayne says the only reason why weed is still on Schedule 1 is because it's a convenient excuse to lock up the law-abiding Black people who smoke it. Yep. That's one of the reasons why the war on drugs existed. Oh no, Paul. No. They would JFK me so quick. Oh my God. Oh my stars and stripes. Nope. Roger says 2 things. First, use the CBI process to give Floridians the right to pass laws with simple majorities. I like that. And Florida government can't alter or repeal without asking voters first, just like with CBI amendments. I like that. GP says 100 LOL 100% for illegal herb. Roger says number 2, if successfully ratified, a public bank will be needed to ensure credit unions and community banks, getting them off the FDIC banking regulations so that they can take those profits from cannabis. Yes, that's another thing. Because it is still a Schedule 1 drug, federally, banks do not touch any type of dispensary that would need to use banks in order to create paychecks and have bank business accounts and things like that. Sorry, I'm not a pineapple on pizza guy. Sorry, but I do respect your right to have pineapple on pizza. Dwayne says weed is illegal just because William Randolph Hearst owned timber. What? I'm gonna have to look into that. All right, everybody, I gotta head on out. It is way past my time. But I would like to thank Todd Schaefer for coming on a little bit earlier to discuss his policy positions. And I forgot to ask him about this, about marijuana legalization, but I'm pretty sure he actually does believe in legalizing it. But of course, thank you so very much for answering all the questions that I had and for taking the time, even though it was a little bit extended than what I wanted. Also, if you guys have not, just continue to stay tuned at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I will be covering the DNC convention this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. So yes, that's going to be a doozy. Stay tuned. These people are going to make me mad. Y'all going to see me lose my composure. I'm trying not to cuss. They make me lose my composure on screen. Oh, Lord. Oh, jeez. All right. And so, and by the way, I will be continuing in the readings of the books. Of course, I already read Of Water in the Spirit on Sunday, so you guys got that. I'll also continue reading of Prejudicial by Margaret Kimberly, and then The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. So we'll be continuing those readings later this week. Also, you have Nick and Rome of RBN. They are in Chicago right now. I think Nick will be giving a speech. I will also cover that speech on here as well. Oh, and while I have you guys here, there was a recent arrest made. A friend to the channel, Richard Medhurst. I would like to go over that really quick, just to share that with you guys and give my thoughts. I'm gonna be honest with you, this is scary. I think this needs to be talked about. I think this needs to be discussed while I have you guys here. Technically, this is a bonus story, but I think, when it comes to press freedom, we have to fight for that as much as possible. And as you can see with people like Julian Assange, press freedom is really on, a hair trigger. These Western countries do not like press freedom because it really interferes with the bottom line of the corporate parasites. And their latest victim, after Scott Ritter, with the FBI raiding his home, and now it is Richard Medhurst that recently also just got arrested in London. So let's go here really quick and let's hear what he had to say. Jeez.
My name is Richard Thomas Medhurst. I'm an internationally accredited journalist from the United Kingdom. On Thursday, as I landed in London Heathrow Airport, I was immediately escorted off the plane by 6 police officers who were waiting for me at the entrance of the aircraft. They arrested me, not detained, they arrested me under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act of 2000 and accused me of allegedly, quote, expressing an opinion or belief that is supportive of a prescribed organization, unquote, but wouldn't explain what this meant. One officer took my bags, and when I asked why he was still back in the aircraft, I was told, look, mate, you can get nicked right here in front of everyone or in there, your choice. So I was taken to an adjacent room, patted down, my phone confiscated. I was not allowed to inform my family. Despite being calm and cooperative, I was handcuffed with something that placed my shoulders in an awkward position and my wrists on top of rather than next to each other. The handcuffs were extremely tight. Despite the police loosening them, they left marks on me for 2 days. The police took me down onto the runway, put me in a police van, essentially a mobile cage, and informed me that everything was being recorded. The van was cramped. I had to struggle the entire time to keep my balance and try not to fall over as we drove to the police station. Now, once inside the station, they searched me again for the second time within 10 minutes. I was told to sit on a bench, remove my shoes, remove my socks. I was told to turn my socks inside out and hold them up for the officers to inspect. They also made me hold up my feet so they could check them as well. The officers took me to a room with UV lights, which they told me is used to catch burglars who are sprayed with something. I have no idea why they did this since they just removed me off of a plane. My suitcase was then opened in the lobby and ransacked. All of my journalistic equipment and devices were seized, including phones, SIM cards, wireless microphones, headphones, even my shoelaces. They later took my DNA as well, my fingerprints, palm prints, and photographed me. I was placed in solitary confinement in a cold cell that smelt like urine. There was barely any light, and the bed, if you can even call it a bed, was simply a small concrete ledge with a paper-thin mattress. The cell had no windows, no heating, no toilet paper. I was recorded 24/7 with audio and video, even when going to the toilet. I had to eat food with a piece of cardboard that you were supposed to fold in two in order to scoop up the meal. The police said that I have the right to inform someone that I'm locked up. So I said, okay, I want to call my family. And then they'd go, well, your calls are withheld because of the nature of the alleged offense. I tried to ask, well, what's the point of a right if you can just randomly withdraw it? Why tell me that I have this right at all? And one of them said something along the lines of, well, it's not an absolute right. It can be waived.
So one of the things that needs to be honed in on is the fact that somebody who is a mass shooter would get more freedom than what Richard Medhurst got. rapists get more freedom than what Richard Medhurst got. And all he did was report the news. When people call for censorship, this happens to people who you agree with and people who you don't agree with. And this is one of the reasons why that I am against censorship. And look at what they did to people like Richard Medhurst. This is crazy. Not only are they doing this against people like Scott Ritter, they're doing this against people like Richard Medhurst. And so, all for speaking out against the empire and speaking in favor of people who are disenfranchised, for speaking out in favor of people who are being exterminated. This is not only something alarming for watching something like that happen to somebody like Richard Medhurst. This is alarming for me because I'm also in this space, also talking about these same things. This is alarming. I'm worried for people like Nick and Rome and Savvy. I'm worried for Danny Haiphong. I'm worried for the people at Indie News Network. Right? I'm worried for people like Zavi Benjamin, who I just had on recently. I'm worried for all the people who are in independent media who are literally speaking out. I'm worried for, people who I'm friends with who write articles. And so if they can do that to him, they can do that to us. This is why it is so important that we fight this system. Because if independent media can't exist, what voice do we have? What truths can we uncover? How can we be an informed citizen if we do not have the means to inform ourselves? Let's continue.
Well, it's not an absolute right. It can be waived. Similarly, they said I had the right to know why I was being detained. So I asked again, and the police would say something like, well, we're just the arresting officers. We don't really know. Or this will be explained to you during the interview, or some other generic response. Now, despite the police officers' civility and cheerfulness, I felt that the whole process was designed to humiliate, intimidate, and dehumanize me and treat me like a criminal, even though they must have been aware of my background and that I'm a journalist. I was under surveillance almost the entire time from the moment I was arrested until I was released, be it in the police van, in the station, the cell, all of it. No privacy whatsoever. Many of my requests were also delayed or outright ignored. When I was detained, I asked for water several times. The police would always say, sure, but then I ended up waiting hours for a tiny cup of water. I asked if I could have my own clothes because I was in a t-shirt. It was cold and I couldn't sleep. They said they'd give me a pullover, but never did, although one guard did give me a second blanket. So you have to nag and nag for the most basic things. And this is why I was afraid that they weren't even going to call a solicitor for me. I was able to see the nurse on one occasion, but on 3 other occasions, when I asked to see the nurse, they'd say yes and then nothing. For many hours, no one in the world knew what had happened to me or where I was. Only the police could call a solicitor for me. I had to ask like 4 or 5 different guards for several hours until I finally received a call. Some of my solicitor's calls did not get through or were not answered. One of the calls, my solicitor was told, would be monitored, and so they simply refused to take it. I asked to speak to the solicitor afterwards when that happened, but I was not allowed to. In total, I spent almost 24 hours in detention. At no point whatsoever was I allowed to speak to a family member or a friend.
Imagine, because you have a right to a phone call, at least from what we were told here in the United States. And what if they can just take that away from you as well? To call an attorney to represent you. You have that right. And yet, that's taken away. Think about what client states like the UK can do to people like Richard Medhurst. Think about what the empire here can do to us. Think about people like Mumia Abu-Jamal. For the simple act of being a journalist, for a simple act of talking about the crimes of the empire, he's still in prison. Think about how our carceral system treats us. Think about how the carceral system in the UK treats people who are in their system. Think about how they treated Julian Assange.
After waiting 15 hours, I was finally interviewed by 2 detectives. The interview lasted about an hour and a half, maybe something like that. So there's clearly no need to hold me there this entire time. But I believe this was done on purpose to try and rattle me psychologically. That failed. I categorically and utterly reject all the accusations by the police. I am not a terrorist. I have no criminal record. Prior to this incident, I'd never been detained in my entire life. I'm a product of the diplomatic community, and I'm raised to be anti-war. Both of my parents won Nobel Peace Prizes for their work as United Nations peacekeepers. They had a tremendous effect on my worldview and outlook and instilled in me the importance of diplomacy, international law, and peace. I myself am a victim of terrorism. When I attended the British school in Islamabad, the Egyptian embassy adjacent to my school was blown up in a double bombing. I categorically and unequivocally condemn terrorism. I am a Medhurst. My family goes back 1,000 years in this country. I come from a long line of public servants. My father served in the London Metropolitan Police before entering the United Nations. He is an expert and an authority on counterterrorism who taught me much. My grandfather was in the Royal Air Force during World War II, and his father before him in the British Army in World War I. I perhaps don't have the same career paths as them, but I consider my journalism to be a public service and my way of doing my bit for the country by providing a counterweight to mainstream media. I love my country. I respect its laws and its legal institutions. I get the feeling, nevertheless, that those like myself who are speaking up and reporting on the situation in Palestine are being targeted. I had booked my ticket to London on the same day, and yet an entire team of police were mobilized to arrest and question me. This is why I felt that this was a pre-planned, coordinated arrest.
They watch. All of us. They watch us. Because if they do not like what you're saying against the empire, they want to rattle you. They want to let you know, hey, we see you. We know exactly what you're doing. And if you don't shut up, then it's curtains for you. And they do that in the West. Because who owns our government?
Many people have been detained in Britain because of their connection to journalism. Sometimes under the Terrorism Act, sometimes not. I think of Julian Assange, Craig Murray, Kit Clarenberg, David Miranda, Vanessa Beeley. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only journalist, however, to have been arrested and held for up to 24 hours under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. Keep in mind the conditions that I outlined previously. The psychological element where you're made to wait endlessly. You've not been told what you're accused of, nor when you'll be questioned. Now, despite having been released unconditionally, I do not feel that my bail is truly unconditional. I'm effectively in limbo, not knowing if I will be charged in 3 months or if I will go to prison. Journalism is my livelihood. I have an ethical and a moral responsibility toward the general public to inform. But I feel that a muzzle has been placed on me. I simply do not know if or how I can work at all during the next months. Palestine, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, remain the most pressing news story in the world. However, it seems that any statement, no matter how innocent, how factual and well-intentioned, can be skewed and twisted into an offense of the highest order. This is precisely the danger and the absurdity of the Terrorism Act that I have always sought to impress upon the public, long before I ever became a victim of it myself. It is out of control. It has no place in a democracy. Counterterrorism laws should be used to fight actual terrorism, not journalism. We cannot call ourselves a democracy as long as reporters are dragged off of planes and detained and treated like murderers. I am disgusted that I am being politically persecuted in my own country. Now, as I do not know if I can still report as a journalist for the next months, I kindly ask you for your support during these times. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech really are under attack. The state is cracking down and escalating to try and stop people from speaking out against our government's complicity in genocide. Please stand not just with me, but with the others who are still inside. I know what they're going through, and the best relief is to know that people on the outside are rooting for you and doing everything they can to get you out. Thank you.
Shout out to Richard Medhurst. That was horrible for him to go through. And this is why it's so important for us to stand with independent media. Because if there's nobody to be independent of the empire, independent of corporations to tell you the truth, then the truth is lost. So if you guys haven't subscribed to Richard Medhurst's channel, go ahead and subscribe there. Show him some love. And, you know, constantly, you know, let people know about the truth tellers so that, you know, people can discover and find out what's really going on. Because until we truly change the system from the ground up, those of us in independent media have a lot of work to do. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to the chat. Let me see here. Dwayne says Richard is out now, but the Brits have gone full fascist. Nihilo says Julian Assange is freed, Ritter and Medhurst targeted. They want us to feel one step forward, two steps back. Yep. Absolutely. And that's the thing. This is fascism. You know, can't have this. This is why the system needs to be changed. Suleiman says the state of the world is insane. Journalism is not a crime. Yep. Journalism is not a crime. So thank you very much to everybody for tuning in. That's going to be the show for today. I just wanted to shout out everybody that's on the ground in Chicago for the DNC convention that are protesting. Please stay safe out there. Drink plenty of water. And, you know, just be loud. Be uncomfortably loud so that they know who you are and the fact that you are in opposition to what the empire is doing. So thank you so very much to all that. Look, water your plants, water yourselves. Leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them. Vote yes on Amendment 3. Drink them if you got them. And if you ain't got them, then watch something funny, because joy is revolutionary. Read because reading is fundamental, and tell the truth because they're going to try to make that illegal too. So take care, everybody. Have yourself a good one. Forehead kisses. And I will see you guys later this evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Deuces, Bruces. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.